Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome everybody to Moore's Talk Live 100. I'm your host, Tarhaka Amana El Bay, and tonight we're dealing with part 2, the Moors stacking up the real truth. Okay, let's recap and make sure that we got this thing right based on the previous information that was provided to you in previous broadcasts. Okay, we have the indigenous people of this land being taken from this land by force, captured, kidnapping, all this here, and taken to Europe and sold into slavery, and then bought back from that place and sold into slavery over in the United States. Also, we have the Moors on this land in ancient times, and the Egyptians on this land in ancient times. Okay, already here. And we're going to do a little bit more verification of that tonight. Okay, I'm just doing a little recap of what we got so far, straightening out all the lies that all of us people of color on this landmass or in the Americas are here as a result of us being kidnapped from Africa and sold into slavery, and we are really African Americans. No. Totally overlooking the fact that we are indigenous to these lands first. Okay, we've already put this information out. You can verify all that. In fact, I'm going to go to the quick commercial break, and when I come back, then we're going back down into some more verification. So y'all hold on a minute. Let me make sure I got this right. You have a mortgage. You were told the bank would give you a loan for your home. But when you got to the bank, they didn't give you anything or sign anything. But presto changeo, you have a new mortgage. Then you find out your mortgage has been sold to another company you don't know and don't have any contract with. It seems to me something is wrong. When you walked out the bank, you had some papers in your hand, but no check. Let's get to the bottom, down to the bottom of this kind of stuff. Go to TarhakaDebtElimination.org. That's TarhakaDebtElimination.org. Let's bring the fraud to a close. How about that? This kind of stuff is going on all over the United States, but most people don't even understand what to do about it. TarhakaDebtElimination.org. Okay, everybody. On October the 26th, 2024, right here in Jacksonville, Florida, the Black Vegan Fest will have live entertainment, fun for the whole family. Children will be able to participate in gardening, adults too. We have live chefs that will be cooking up vegan dishes and educational programs and games to play. People will be here from all over the United States. Don't miss it. October the 26th, 2024, right here, Jacksonville, Florida. Peace. All right, everybody, we're back. Now, let's do some of this right here. Let's deal with America and Egypt, the untold story. We're going to do that, okay? Then we're going to deal with, the first thing I want to deal with is, because you got this thing come up in November with everybody running down in the poll and vote. Yeah, you vote, and you think that when you vote, that your vote counts for something. Right? All right, let's see.
Unless and until you redirect your activism towards the private sector, and I mean organize and mobilize with the understanding that, for example, corporations are political entities. So treat them as such, deal with them as such, impose expectations and demands upon them as such. Unless and until you do that, all your get out the vote initiatives, all your campaigning, all your voting will never do anything for social and political change except to ensure that it won't happen. Boeing, for example, just used your government to make around $20 billion. Boeing, Raytheon, and all the other merchants of death and destruction. They just got $20 billion of your money to keep the genocide going in Gaza. That's their policy. Zionism is their policy. Genocide is their policy, and they're doing it for money. And they give almost evenly to the Democrats as they do to the Republicans, except they give slightly more to the Democrats. These are the entities that control your policy. It's not your ballot, it's their billions. Your government is captured, and your country has been captured, and power and decision-making has been transferred from the public sector to the private sector. I mean, the so-called Enlightenment was supposed to usher in a new era of rationality and reason and justice and brotherhood and equality and all of that. And what actually followed was white supremacy, colonization, predatory capitalism, hundreds of millions of deaths in war, the PR and propaganda industries, disinformation, misinformation, and control of information, unprecedented concentration of wealth and power in fewer and fewer hands, undreamt of, by the way, by the monarchs and popes of the Dark Ages, income disparity like the world has never seen, on and on. Yes, technology also, but technology driven by the war industry, by slaughterhouse mining in subjugated countries, brutal resource extraction, not to mention your enlightenment brought about the ability to annihilate all human life on this planet. That's you enlightened. And you call all of that prosperity and security and progress. I mean, just look at how money controls politics in America today. The Supreme Court's decision on the Citizens United case opened the floodgates for corporate money in elections. Billionaires and corporations pour millions and millions of dollars into political campaigns, drowning out the voices of ordinary people, of the whole electorate. They're hiring candidates. They're writing laws. They're purchasing policies that serve their interests. This isn't democracy, it's oligarchy. When a handful of wealthy individuals can dictate policy and sway elections, obviously democracy doesn't exist. Politicians just do a tour of duty in government to prove their loyalty to their funders before moving to highly paid positions in the private sector, working then for the same people that they worked for all along. The democracy they have is the one they always intended to have, which is one in which only the rich and the owners of the society have any say. You have the right to free speech only because no one listens to you. You know, they just made homelessness illegal in America. Can you imagine that? It's illegal to be homeless, but not illegal to make you homeless. Criminalizing being poor when you are made poor by a criminal system. You're not allowed to not have enough money to pay for your own survival, but they're allowed to make your survival too expensive to pay for. And if you have any blotch on your credit record, it may as well be a criminal record. You can't rent, you can't get a job, you can't secure housing, you can't get a car, anything. And they talk about China's social credit system. Well, you invented it. They've got your social security number around your neck like an iron collar. Everybody in that country has debt collectors chasing after them like bloodhounds after an escaped convict.
All right, we're back. How about that, y'all? I'm inclined to believe every word he just said. Because I look back and I said, well, my people have been voting Democrat ever since I came in the world. And I keep looking around, and for the life of me, I can't see nothing that we have as a result of running down and voting Democrat for anything. I'm looking at the people in the neighborhood. I'm looking at the streets, potholes. I'm looking at the infrastructure of our community. It rains and water gets so high, come all up in the house. But then I noticed that over in the very, very rich and super rich area, none of these things transpire. I don't see any of that. It seems to me that all the voting we've been doing ain't done nothing to do anything about anything. Okay. But nevertheless, I ain't gonna be barking on that all night. We will be back. And now y'all hold on a minute. Let's deal with some historical evidence of the Moors in the Americas.
And minarets. There's a book also that details and outlines priests from Spain and Portugal coming to America in the 1500s. This book was written, and it has a melanated woman chief on top of these pale slave servants.
Wow.
Right? And the book is it's called A History of America, something like that, real old book. And in the book, it talks about the different cities and places that the colonists or the conquistadors saw. Cities and towns that already exist. When they come there, they said, we came to this city, we saw Montezuma in the city of X, Y, and Z.
Mexico
a city that
City
they're
now.
calling it today. Right.
Yeah.
A city that they're calling it today.
That's a good point.
They are saying we went to these places in America. So they did not build these places when they came to America. So our people got a different perspective of what happened in colonization. When they came to America, it was already thriving civilizations with different shades of melanated people. Some having African blood, some having a mixture of Asian blood. Some it was a mixture. It was a melting pot. The same way America is today is what it always was.
Wow.
Right? So now that we got that out the way and we targeted Hispaniola, Haiti, just some background information. My father is Haitian, so I have Haitian ancestry.
Oh, wow.
And my mother is Gullah Geechee from Charleston, South Carolina.
Okay.
Now, an interesting story is, just quickly, my 5 times great-grandfather escaped slavery in Georgetown, South Carolina, to Marysville, South Carolina.
Wow.
And Marysville was a town founded by a free black woman, right? And it got incorporated into the city of Charleston in the 1960s. But my grandfather escaped because he, unalived the slave master who was trying to, take his wife by force.
Wow. Wow.
You know?
Yeah.
And he escaped with his wife and his 3-year-old daughter. But that's my mother ancestry. On my father's side, I have a last name that's, we can talk about this later when we talk portions about the status correction.
Right.
My slave name, Casimir, right, is Polish. So I always wanted to know, how does a name like that end up in Haiti? Well, in the Haitian Revolution, there were Polish soldiers who were fighting against Haiti at one point. But then the Haitians gave them an ultimatum of, you join us and fight with us against France, Spain, England, and all of that, then, we'll give you safe harbor.
Wow.
So there were, but that's not on my paternal lineage side. There's still some clarity that has to be made for that. But my point is, when we're talking about the Haitian Revolution, that island, because it culminated in all the superpowers of Europe fighting against all of the indigenous powers in the Americas. Because when Haiti was liberated, the rest of the Americas began to get liberated. You had the Muslim rebellion in Brazil that took place after that. But the Haitian Revolution, what a lot of people don't realize, was a lot of different tribes that were indigenous to the area, and that were from West Africa. Because when they got there, they said that the Haitians, come from Taino people, because Haiti, right? They come from, indigenous peoples as well. But you also have that African presence there who were trading long before Columbus got there, because when he got there, they said, we've been trading these spear tips called guanine that's mixed with some different type of alloys that they do in West Africa. So you have the Yoruba and the Dahomey culture who were also brought to that island. And that's where you get the concept of voodoo, right? But what they don't speak about is the Islamic presence there,
right,
or the Muslim presence there, that came from the marabouts of West Africa.
Wow.
In West Africa, there's these holy men, these Muslim scholar holy men, Sufi types, called marabouts. You can find a lot of them in Senegal today. They were also brought to America, and they participated in the Haitian Revolution. So, like, earlier shades of the Haitian Revolution was a dude, I think he was from Jamaica. His name was Boukman.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep. Heard of him.
Boukman comes from bookman, or man of the book, which is in Islam, pretty much a man of the kitab. You see what I'm saying? The book, the holy book. So there's a lot of history that's been hidden about the Islamic presence in Haiti and its Haitian Revolution as well, So when we start to talk about Toussaint Louverture, something we was talking about earlier, is that what our people don't understand a lot of times, because based on a lot of the arguing that took place in the comment sections of the posts, is that they don't understand that Moor is a legal and political term historically that apply to our people. In terms like African or tribal designations are more archaeological and anthropological in their usage. So they're trying to take, I know because there was a lot of litigation that I was involved in many years ago as it pertains to the Moorish ID identification and status. And when it's applied in a legal venue, it is applied, African in terms like that is applied in a more archaeological and anthropological term. But more is applied, or when you are using it, it's applied in a legal and a political sense, because the U.S. had a dictionary that they put out in the early 1900s called the U.S. Dictionary of Races and People, and it defines more. And even the Britannica, I put out a definition on TikTok and another place on Instagram and all of that. that details from the Britannica Encyclopedia that American Negro is a new cultural product, as they say, consisting of all the tribes of Africa, including Moors and Arabs, right, as well as diverse from the yellow Hottentots to the south to everybody, the Bantus, everybody. And it says even if the African American didn't have Native American or white ancestry, they still would be so different from any single tribe in Africa that they're their own group. Wow. So you're looking at a bloodline that has now combined, it's like the Infinity Stones. You know, you collect all of them, combine them to one power. That's what the African American, as they term, has that bloodline. But my point is, the definition says including Moors and Arabs. So a lot of times our people get caught up into what they identify with, not realizing that all of these identities we say we are consists within us in our bloodline. So we don't have to have preference to any one of them unless we want to. But we should use the right terms in the right venues for the right purposes, you know, because it matters. Because having that application extends certain rights to you that you don't have accessible to you due to them creating identities for us, slave names, racial classifications that place us at a disadvantage or as second or third class citizens within their geopolitical structure. You see what I'm saying? So when we start to examine all of the activity in the Americas, it's not a shock that Toussaint Louverture, and I know the picture you're talking about, it can be located at the Library of Congress as well. So you can Google it, people can pull it up. I know you're going to show the picture. And so that shows you as the evidence of what type of concept that they were dealing with when they were even dealing with liberation, because when you really examine the liberation movements among the enslaved in the Americas, you're going to find out that they were Muslim most of the time. Yes, sir. And they were a more dominating force because they had a single language and they could read, write, and do math because that's mandatory in Islam. Wow. Whereas the tribes who weren't had issues communicating because the language was different. You see, so that gave the Muslims enslaved among them the opportunity to plan and prep.
It's an advantage.
Right, it's an advantage. You know, so yeah, I'll pause right there.
Bro, hey, killing it, as usual, man. Again, bro, you said something that was very, very profound about cities, right? Me and Aaron, you know, we would have these same conversations all the time, like New York, it was already there. Louisiana Purchase, Haitian Revolution leads to that. St. Louis, all of those things, right? Mexico City. Aaron, bro, if you can, man, because, look, this time he's not sick, y'all, so he can give us a little bit of some gems. But, bro, man, you told me at length about New York, St. Louis, like all those cities. So for all the people who don't know, America was already here, right? All the cities, all those things, right?
Yeah, definitely. Just like Mansa had laid out, those are ancient energy centers, and they've been here. You know, it's cultivated by the original Americans that were already inhabited, which the colonists have found. And you can tell just by the big thing is like the World Fair, right? Yeah. And so like the World Fair, if y'all familiar with it, if y'all could just look it up. There's the one that I first came to was the one in St. Louis, and then there's one in San Diego, I think. There's New York, but there's several others, right? But if you look and research the World Fair, you'll see these buildings and these edifices where it's just if you look at the architecture, it's like nothing that we see today, right? And it's said, I mean, there's like monolithic structures, just like immaculate architecture, right? And it said that it was a tour. So, you know, the story is it's like the fairs was built, people came, you know, had fun there, whatever, spent the money, and then like they would take the buildings down and then move it and then build it up somewhere else, right? And it's cool if you don't like dive into it. Sounds good, but when you really dive into it, you're like, oh, hold on. You look at the buildings and the structures and things like that. You're like, oh, these are complete cities and things like, you know. And so why would you? First of all, why would you destroy it and then pack it up? And you can't physically do it. Like, we couldn't do that now with the technology that we have right now and the way construction has developed and the machinery and things like that. We couldn't pull that off now.
Yeah.
And, you know, we weren't pulling it off then. So really, that was destroying stuff that was there. And, you know, you have reconstruction eras of the history of the U.S. So it all the timing, it just is, the chronology just fits of them destroying that stuff. And that's really the reborn evidence of the city that was really we're really the old world over here. So, and it was, you know, just reconstructing the history and things like that. So.
Wow. Bars, bro. So mosque in Haiti, right? So Aaron's point, you know, cities already being there. In school, we aren't taught about any of those things. Instead, you know, we're taught that Haiti, America, was this primitive place, pre-colonialism, all of those things. So how advanced were we as a people during those times?
Well, man, it's real interesting because when you say that they don't teach us this stuff in school, they don't teach us this stuff in school because of how it would empower us. So science, a lot of scientists say you can't say something is happening today or happened in the past.
Right.
Unless you can prove it's happening today. Right? So a lot of times when people ask me certain things about things, I try to show them something in real time that's happening that can confirm that. And one thing we can point to confirm that is the governor of Florida has banned DeSantis has banned African American studies, saying it's not relevant to the curriculum. So and then Texas a few years ago were trying to reclassify slaves in the textbooks as migrant workers, right? So
wow.
So that's in real time. So they don't even want us to know.
Trying to change the history
again. For the public. So again, so when you say this is why they don't teach us this in school, because there's a narrative. If you know, one of the I'm gonna go around the world and come back.
You good.
One of the things I mainly want to do with my life, inshallah, I'm able to do it, is to build sustainable smart cities. Right? Little Wakandas everywhere. Basically. I believe that's the future. And it's the present. And that's our pathway to ultimate, you know, power, right? But when we examine, if somebody told you that we had the technology all along to have free energy, right? And we had cars made of hemp, cars to be able to run off water, and, you know, all type of free energy sources. There's a brother today that's drawing water, fresh water from the air, from the atmosphere.
Wow.
So if I told you all that stuff already existed, and you would be like, why we don't have that stuff today? And it's because it's been suppressed, because the technology already existed. When you really study the history, the European colonists, as we understand them to be, didn't really take power until the Civil War. People say the South didn't win the Civil War, but they did. Because when you look at who Abraham Lincoln's running mate was, he was a Confederate.
Stevens, right?
Right.
Last name was Stevens. Yeah.
He was a Confederate.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
So what happened when they killed Lincoln? Lincoln said under the 13th Amendment that the states didn't have jurisdictional authority over the freemen. And when that occurred, that means we had no jurisdictional subjection to the state powers, only the federal government, right? Because the Emancipation Proclamation freed see, people get caught up in slave, but it's really jurisdiction is the term that should be understood.
Right.
Right? Because jurisdiction is who has the authority to determine legally what they can do with you under their power. So the 13th Amendment deprived the state of jurisdiction and enslavement powers. So they killed Lincoln, then took back the 40 acres and the mule that we were supposed to get.
Right.
And gave us the 14th Amendment, which makes the Bill of Rights binding on the states, and created a new citizenship type class.
Black codes.
Right.
Those get implemented. Wow.
Right. So my point in all of that is, and it was the Confederates who did it. Right. Because the dude who took over after Lincoln, you know, so the reason why that's important is when you start to look at who the Confederates are, right? You're going to find out that the Confederates were actually that flag that they call a Confederate flag.
With the X,
that's called a rebel flag.
Yes.
Right, but they also got it from, I want to say the Iroquois or some Native American.
How ironic.
No, so if you look up Olmec statues, you see Olmec statues like ancient Mesoamerica.
I never knew that, bro.
You'll see like right under the neck, like under their chin, and you'll see a rectangle with the X on it. So that's an American symbol. It's ancient. It's been there. So they didn't create that.
Right.
As usual, right?
Just like red, white, and blue, they got that from the ancient Egyptians. And the sign that the Nazis in them ran with was a symbol of peace sign.
Yeah.
So it's just like you see with other things where other symbols are co-opted. That's all they did.
Wow.
So the reason all of that's important is because I'm going somewhere.
Right.
When you find out that the Confederate concept is a Berber concept, an ancient Moorish concept, because they had confederacies. Then you find out that the people who signed the Articles of Association, which is the founding document that turned the colonies into the process of becoming a nation state.
Right.
When you look up the people on the Articles of Association, a lot of them are described as having dark skin and being black Moors and swarthy, right?
Hey.
Right.
Wow.
Then when you start finding out stuff about King George and a lot of these European kings, you start finding out that they had dark skin and they were called Moors too. Then it's a book, Ancient and Modern Britons, breaks a lot of that stuff down. So as you continue to go further back in time, you start unraveling that they didn't have a control or power like they do now back then, which is how they try to sell it to us. Because ancient America was already thriving with civilizations. See, a lot of people say this civilization came first, or Africa came first, or America came first. The world is billions of years old.
Right.
And, you know, they got, in the caves of Africa over there, they got dinosaurs painted on the walls running around with humans.
Wow.
And they found, it's a book called Forbidden Archaeology. They found human footprints next to dinosaurs. If some people say dinosaurs real, some people say they aren't. Point is, they found human footprints next to it. So my point is I don't get into the conversation of what's older. What I do know is that the ancient world had an international trade system like we do today.
Indeed.
And all European colonists did was get in the way and play middleman and take over. But they lied about who's who and what's what.
All right, there you have it. Okay. Tonight, we will be dealing with what further evidence do we have of Moors and Egyptians in the Americas? Are Negroes and blacks, Moors and Egyptians one and the same people? If you are indigenous to the Americas, how could you be an African American? How could you be labeled an African American? How long have the Moors and Egyptians been in the Americas? How long? What explains life in the country we live in? We're going to deal with that next. But what do other nations think of us in the United States? These are the questions that we plan to answer tonight. But I want to state at the outset, based on the information that the brother just laid out, that's a very profound, very interesting. Even though I ran across this here, I mentioned a book to you, but I want to also mention another book. It's called Nature Knows No Color Line. And that was written by a gentleman by the name of J.A. Rogers. And inside this book, he was forced to label the Moors as Negroes. Otherwise, the United States say that we will not allow you to publish this book in the United States until you change the word Moor to Negro. Okay? So when you get that book and you see that, then you will know why he had to do that, because he wanted to reach as many of the people as he could, but he was trying to tell you about all of the Moors on the coat of arms of the so-called ruling families of Europe. Now listen to me what I'm saying. So-called, labeled as such, the ruling class of Europe. It is your image that appears on the coat of arms. The book is entitled Nature Knows No Color Line by J.A. Rogers. Okay, let's start dealing with whether or not there were Moors in the Americas a long time ago. Okay? Yeah, hold on a minute.
Imagine a time before Columbus, before the Vikings, when black Moors roamed America, a mystery from the past that still baffles historians today. The story begins with Vasco Núñez de Balboa, a Spanish conquistador, who is best known for possibly being the first European to reach the Pacific Ocean in 1513. But Balboa's journey to the Americas started much earlier, with his first stop along the borders of Colombia, before settling in Hispaniola in 1500. After settling in the Americas, he later became governor of the Mar del Sur and of the provinces of Panama and Coiba. It was in Panama that Balboa, as documented by Peter Martyr, claimed to have encountered Aboriginal Negroes in 1513. Martyr quoted Balboa saying, "There is a region not past 2 days' journey distant from Corepa, in which they found only black Moors, and these exceedingly fierce and cruel." So, how did these black Moors end up in America before the Europeans? Let's delve deeper into Balboa's journey to find out. But before we get into the rest of this video, we want to take a quick second to tell you about our special limited time offer. We are giving away free copies of our newest critically acclaimed book, 13 Black Scholars Who Admitted There Were Black People in the Americas Before Columbus. This exclusive offer is our way of saying thank you for your incredible support and sticking with us on our knowledge-filled journey into true ancient American history. Dive deep into history with us and uncover truths that challenge what we've been taught. But hurry, this offer won't last forever. Click the link in the description and grab your free copy. Now let's get back to the video. Vasco Núñez de Balboa, a name etched in history as the first European to reach the Pacific Ocean. But his journey was not just about exploration, it was about the people he encountered. Setting sail from Spain, Balboa embarked on a voyage that would change the course of history. His ship first docked along the borders of Colombia, a land filled with untold mysteries and unexplored territories. From there, he moved on to Hispaniola in 1500, where he settled and began to establish his foothold in the Americas. But Balboa's thirst for exploration was unquenchable. He later journeyed to Panama, a land of lush greenery and rivers that flowed with gold. It was here, amid the verdant landscapes of Panama, that Balboa had his most startling encounter. Balboa's journey was filled with encounters that challenged the known history of the world, but none more so than his encounter with the Black Moors. In 1513, in the lands of Panama, Balboa reported an encounter that would baffle historians for centuries. As the Spanish conquistador explored the region, he stumbled upon a group of Black Moors. These people, according to Balboa's account, were fierce, cruel, and most intriguingly, present in the Americas before the arrival of Europeans. This encounter was documented by Peter Martyr, a contemporary of Balboa. Martyr quotes Balboa as saying he found only black Moors, exceedingly fierce and cruel, a mere 2-day journey from Corepa. The origins of these black Moors, how they arrived in America, and their interactions with the indigenous population are shrouded in mystery. Some theories suggest that these Moors sailed from Ethiopia and accidentally shipwrecked and ended up in these lands. Other theories suggest that these were descendants of the leftover Moors from Spain who had set up bases in the America that they had used for trade over the centuries. Perhaps they were explorers, much like Balboa himself, who found themselves in uncharted territories. The mystery of black Moors in America continues to intrigue us. Balboa's journey and his encounters serve as a reminder that history is not always as clear-cut as it seems. The past is full of mysteries waiting to be unraveled. Trust us when we say, this journey through America's hidden black past is just beginning. If this glimpse into a world lost to time has captured your imagination, smash that like button and don't forget to subscribe for more adventures into the unknown. Lastly, for more information about the names and subjects mentioned in this video, get your copy of the Amazon best-selling book series, 19 White Men Who Admitted There Were Indigenous Black People in the Americas, and 13 Black Scholars Who Admitted There Were Black People in the Americas Before Columbus by Chase McGee. Link in the description. Stay curious and keep exploring.
So today we're going to be talking about black Indian chiefs in the Americas. All right, so this first book we're reading in, this is called All the Year Round, Winter, all right, by Francis Lucius Strong. Okay, now watch what it says. It says, Black Hawk is the name of a little Indian boy who lives in the far west. Many years ago, when Columbus came to America, the Indians owned all of this beautiful country. But the white people have driven them farther and farther west. It says Black Hawk's father is an Indian chief and a brave warrior. It says the little boy has long, straight black hair and a dark, reddish brown skin. Y'all see that? Dark, reddish brown skin, which you're really just describing the so-called African Americans. That's who you're describing, but in order to throw y'all off, they have to use dark reddish brown skin instead of just saying these are so-called black people. Because when you start seeing dark reddish brown, your mind start wandering somewhere else. When they're talking about you, this is how they throw you off and keep you confused about who you are. This is from a book called A History of the Black Church in Tuscaloosa. All right. It says the city of Tuscaloosa, Tuscaloosa County, and the Black Warrior River runs through the city of Tuscaloosa. All take their name from the Choctaw Indian chief Tuscaloosa. Tuska meaning warrior, Lusa meaning black, which was translated as Tuscaloosa and later Tuscaloosa. It says, according to historical accounts, Chief Tuscaloosa was a very wise and respected leader and was of impressive physical stature, standing nearly 7 feet tall. He encountered Spanish explorer Hernando de Soto. That's what I wanted to point out. He encountered Hernando de Soto. And we know every time Hernando de Soto described the American Indians, what were they described as? Black people. Even Chief Tuscaloosa, the name even tells you itself, the Black Warrior. He was a black man. He was a so-called black man. And it says he encountered Hernando de Soto. Let's go get an account of Hernando de Soto, and we're going to see what he described the Indians as. All right, this book is called The History of Hernando de Soto and Florida, or Record of Events from 1512 to 1568. Watch what these Carolina Indians are described as. You guys heard this before. It says they go entirely naked, except that about the loins, they wear skins of small animals like martens fastened by a girdle of plaited grass, to which they tie all around the body of the tails of other animals, hanging down to the knees, and all other parts of the body and head are naked. It says some wear garlands similar to birds' feathers. The complexion of these people is black, not much different from that of the Ethiopians. Okay, so it said these people were black. Now watch this as we go down on the next page to what it's going to say about the same people. It says, our sailors in the boat seen a great fire made up, and their companion placed very near it, full of fear, and as usual in all cases of novelty, imagined that the natives were about to roast him for food. But as soon as he had recovered his strength after a short stay with them, showing by signs that he wished to return aboard, they hugged him with great affection and accompanied him to the shore. Then leaving him that he might feel more secure, they withdrew to a little hill from which they watched him until he was safe in the boat. This young man remarked that these people were black like the others. You see that? Black like the others. So all the other people that were being described as black, these Indians were being described as black as well. So why is it always a problem when we bring this history out? To me, it's almost as if you pay attention, it's almost as if everybody knows this, but they want us to just be quiet about it. They don't want us to talk about it. Don't say anything about what these Indians look like. And if you do, you're trying to blackwash, or it's an Afrocentric narrative. It's not. We're reading the history. This is from the book called The History of Hernando de Soto. They're writing this in the book that was written hundreds of years ago before any of us was even born. So how are we blackwashing anything? We're just reading the history, but y'all don't like what it says. See, this is the history that gets covered up and hidden and omitted from the real history. So now when we bring this stuff out, again, this is like telling you your father is not really your father. You're going to kick against it because it's information you've never heard before. And it's the same thing with anything else. This is going back to Chief Tuscaloosa now. The Battle of Mobile in October 1540, while journeying through present-day Alabama, De Soto and company encountered and initially befriended Chief Tuscaloosa or Tuscaloosa, apparently with the design of capturing him. So they tried to capture him because they wanted to put him in slavery, him and the tribe. All right? It says the plan failed. However, because the chief was not fooled and discreetly summoned numerous Indian warriors in the region to concentrate for an attack on the Spaniards at Mobile, an Indian town in present-day Clark, Alabama, about 25 miles north of the confluence of Alabama and Tobago rivers. It says the Spaniards eventually prevailed and then burned the town, but the victory proved costly. More than 2,500 Indians and nearly 100 Spaniards died, and hundreds more were wounded, including De Soto himself. It says the battle, it is likely that Tuscaloosa ruled over a chiefdom that will later be called the Mobile tribe. Spanish chroniclers describe the Indian chief as a gigantic black man. You see that? Okay, this is a PDF called Tuscaloosa and the Origin of Its Name. Okay, watch this. It says, at Tallahassee, which was the southern boundary of Coosa, De Soto was met by an ambassador from the Cacique of the neighboring province called Tuscaloosa. This is a pure Choctaw compound word, according to Meek, from the Tuska, warrior, and Lusa, or Lusa, black, which would, of course, be warrior black, but by inversion into English, black warrior. You see that? The black warrior. Did I make that up? No, all of this stuff that you can download, all of this stuff. And I'm gonna put this, I'm gonna put this PDF on my website so you guys can download this and read it yourself. Now this book is called The Horse and Blackfoot Indian Culture. This is another Indian chief named White Quiver. Watch this. It says White Quiver vowed vengeance against that tribe, referring to the Crow Indians, because the Crow Indians and the Piegan Indians, these Blackfoot Indians, they always had smoke for each other. So the Blackfoot and the Crow was always beefing. All right? It says in later years, he led many raids on their horse herds. White Quiver started going on war parties while still a boy. He grew to be a tall, strong man of remarkable physical stamina who could ride 3 days and nights without food while driving captured horses homeward from an enemy camp. Rats at the Door, who went on 8 horse raids under White Quiver leadership, remembered him as a generous, easygoing, fun-loving man. He described White Quiver's appearance as tall, very dark, and ugly. The Crow Indians, who suffered most from his thievery, dubbed him the Big Negro. Did I write that? Did I write that? No, I did not. Okay? That's in the book. The book written by John Ewers. He wrote this. I didn't write it. This book was written before any one of us was even born. My grandmother wasn't even born when this book was written. So don't come talking about y'all blackwashing history. That's what the book say. It says Crow mothers are said to have disciplined their crying children by saying, "Keep quiet, the big Negro is out there." So they would scare their children to be quiet, saying the big Negro is out there, referring to Chief White Quiver. So did I make that up? Absolutely not. Y'all just mad because we bringing this stuff out. Now, as y'all can see, this is from newspapers.com. This is of a woman named Rainbow Sistesso. Okay? Now, y'all have seen this picture before. I don't know about this, but y'all seen pictures of her that y'all post all around the internet. This woman was the granddaughter of Chief Yellow Cloud, Sioux Indian girl and granddaughter of Chief Yellow Cloud. You see that? And I want y'all to see this good so y'all can see her face. Indian Chief's daughter. This is the same woman y'all been posting. Most people had no idea this is the same woman. Her name is Rainbow Sistesso. She is a Sioux Indian. We're not making this history up. So y'all need to go get y'all fact checkers and fact check the work and stop hating. Today I'm going to do a little something different, man. I just want to show y'all some things, all right? I want to show y'all some things that you can relate to. And this just adds on to everything we've been teaching as far as us being indigenous to America. And I'm going to show you some of the things that these people have taken from us, stolen it from us, and all they've done is industrialized it to make money. Some of the things that y'all are well familiar with, and y'all know this is straight up so-called black culture. Watch this. We're going to get into the first thing. Now, the first thing going to be a little different, but the rest of them, you're going to be able to, it's going to rest right with your spirit. All right, y'all, look. Now, this book is called The Visionary Mayan Queen, all right? Pay attention to this. It says, but adding housing for elite and wealthy citizens was not Yol Ignaal's true motive in expanding the Tarhaka group. This relatively isolated complex with a panoramic view of the northern plains far below hid the most sacred shrine of Lakanha, the Saknukna'a white skin house, the underground structure dedicated to the triad deities. So our ancestors, the Mayans, built a complex where they would worship their gods at. And they called it the Saknukna'a, which stood for white skin house. What does that sound like? White skin house. The only other people that have a white house is in Washington, D.C., okay? They took that concept from our ancestors. All they did was remove the skin and just called it White House. And we're going to show you the architecture so you can see the similarities in the architecture. It says access to the Saknukna'a was through underground tunnels carved many years before by workers now departed to other dimensions. So they said in order to get to this White House, you had to go through underground tunnels. That is the very same thing with the White House in Washington, D.C. All you got to do right now is go and look up. You can look this up. The White House in Washington, D.C. is supposed to have underground tunnels, and one of them is supposed to be connected directly to the Treasury Department. You can look this up. They stole that concept of the White House from our people, and they industrialized it. That's all they did. This is a picture of it, and then we're going to show you the actual comparisons, okay? And let me see if I can blow this up. You see that? It said it's called the Saknukna'a, white skin house. Is the lighter structure to the right of the tower. You see that? So they even stole some of the architecture. You can see that. Clearly you can see similarities. Now watch this. Let's go show you both of them at the same time. Now you can't look at this and tell me you don't see some similarities. We can see clear similarities in this place. They got the same little doorways right here, the same little doorways right here. They got windows right here. It's the same way as this White House right here in Washington, D.C. It's almost the same thing. They stole it from our people, and capitalize off of it. That's all they do. They industrialize everything they steal. They take it from us and industrialize it. But watch this. This is just the first thing. It gets better. It gets better. Watch this. Okay, this is from a book called The Menominee Indians of Wisconsin, a study of 3 centuries of cultural history. All right? Now watch this, y'all. Listen to this carefully. Okay? It says, he describes his journey up the Fox, noting the wild rice and game. At Butte des Morts, he meets a morning party of Indians, probably of Menominee. It says, we stopped here a while, finding some of that nation on the spot who came there to pay their respect to their departed friend. So they going up to worship their dead friend. Watch what they do, y'all, and I want you to see if this sounds familiar to you. It said they came up to worship their dead friend. It said they had a small keg of rum. So they got the liquor out there with them. It says, and they sat around the grave. They filled their calumet and began their ceremony by pinting the stem of the pipe in different directions, after which they smoked it out. So they smoking up there, you know what I'm saying? They up there again, they up there doing they do. You know what I'm saying? You know what they doing? They doing they do. Watch this. It says, then they took some of the rum out of the keg in a small bark vessel and poured it on the head of the grave. It said they took some of the drink, y'all, and poured it on the head of the grave. What does that sound like to you? Pouring out for their dead homies. That's what they did. They did the same thing we do today. Who started that? So-called black people. We started that. We invented that. That is our culture. Now, why was these Indians doing it? Because they're the same exact people. See, one thing y'all got to understand is our culture, it is embedded in our spirit. It is embedded in our spirit. Everything that you do is the same thing as your ancestors did. You cannot run away from your Indian origin. You cannot run away from it. It's tattooed on your heart, man. You still do the same thing your ancestors did.
For the dudes who ain't here.
He poured some out for the brothers who ain't here. Did we just not read that in the book? He said, for the dudes who ain't here. He took them a squig, poured some out. Pour out some liquor for my dead homies. That's our culture. Why those Indians doing the same thing that we was doing? Why? Because we are those people. We are those people. It's no way around it, man. And y'all sit back and y'all still want to question this? Watch this. Let's go back to that book again. You see what dude just did? Hold on. It says, then they took some rum out of the keg in a small bark vessel and poured it on the head of the grave. Then they all drank themselves, lit the pipe, and steamed it to enjoy themselves very well. They out there drinking and smoking, paying homage to their dead homies. The same thing we do. The same thing we do. We started that culture because you are the people, man. It takes a long time to take a person and brainwash their culture out of them. And even out of all this time that they had us in this state to where they have stripped our knowledge from us, it's still natural things that you do that you can't get away from. It's natural things that you do that you can't get away from that show that you are the people. It's still embedded in your spirit, man. Look at this sister right here, man. What does that say on her shirt? Gumbo green. Sister in the kitchen cooking gumbo, man. Look, she even gave you the recipe to it. You understand what I'm saying? Seafood gumbo, man. Come on. Why am I pointing out this? Why am I pointing out gumbo? Let me show you where that came from. Watch this. Now, this book is from American Indian Contributions to the World. It says, American Indians had a major influence on Southern cooking. They taught colonists to fry cornbread by dropping spoonfuls of cornmeal dough into hot bear fat. These later became known as hush puppies. Come on, man. Listen, I can stop right there, but I'm going to keep going. It says Indian porridge made from hominy grits became a favorite breakfast food in the South and is still served today. Come on, man. Y'all ever seen the movie Tyson with that was played by Michael Jai White when he played as Mike Tyson? When he was sitting on the couch, he was like, I want some hominy grits. Come on, man, that's black folk food. And I'm just using the word black folk so everybody know what we talking about. That's indigenous food, man. It says American Indians also introduced Southern colonists to pecans, the essential ingredient in pecan pie. The Choctaw, who lived in what are now Mississippi and Alabama, used dried ground sarsaparilla leaves to thicken soups and stews. They taught Southern settlers to make sarsaparilla thickened dish called fowl gumbo or filet gumbo. It is often made from vegetables, shrimps, and crabs. Filet gumbo has become a famous part of Cajun cuisine. Do you see that? That is the gumbo, man. Who is that? Shout out to Louisiana. Shout out to all of my Louisiana and Mississippi Indians. I'm one of them. You understand? Where does that come from? What tribe is that? The Choctaw, my tribe. You dig what I'm saying? Come on, man. We ain't finna, listen, man. Let me listen. If this ain't clear to y'all by now that we these people, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know what to tell you. If you ain't gonna get this down, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know what to tell you. If you still in disbelief, I don't know what to tell you. But just in case you in disbelief, just in case that everything I'm telling you right now is bull crap, and you like, man, I'm still not believing nothing you talking about right now, bro. You this, and that. Bro, this last one, this is from the same book, American Indian Contributions to the World. Now, I don't care what you say. You ain't escaping this one, bro. I don't care what you say. Now, people was in my comments arguing with me about where basketball come from. Talking about this white man created basketball. Didn't know white man created basketball, and I looked it up, and I know what y'all talking about. As a matter of fact, I'm going to do it for y'all right now because I don't want y'all to think, you know what I'm saying, I'm making this up or something. They talking about this man, James Naismith. Talking about he created basketball in the 1800s. Stop it. Watch this. It says American Indians played many competitive sports and games. They held wrestling and running contests. Indians of Mesoamerica and North America Southwest played team sports that included a game like modern basketball. They used a rubber ball. Indians of North America invented lacrosse and hockey. You see that? Watch this. It says they also played other team sports such as games called chunky and snow snake. Indians played board games that required strategy and games of chance with dice. You see that? With dice. Who you always see playing dice? The so-called black man. Come on, man. Let's stop playing with us. It says contests, sports, and games serve as a source of entertainment. Physical competitions kept American Indians fit and improved their skills for war. Sometimes these competitions were used as a way to settle arguments. It says basketball. About 3,000 years ago, American Indians began playing a form of basketball. The Olmec, who lived in what is now Mexico from about 1700 BC to 400 BC, invented the game. They used latex from the rubber trees that grew where they lived to make rubber balls. You see that? The Olmec built huge stone ball courts in the center of their cities. 8.5-foot tall stone walls surrounded the courts. Stone discs with holes in the center were mounted on the side walls. Players threw a rubber ball through the hole in the stone to make a goal. Do you see that? That is the same thing today. Basketball. It is the same thing. It's the same thing, man. And you wondering why you dominate in basketball. Why the greatest player, Michael Jordan, 23, no other player greater than him, you feel me? Why he dominates basketball? Why is he the greatest player? Why you got Kobe Bryant? Why you got LeBron James? Why you got Kareem Abdul-Jabbar? You got Shaq. You got Penny. You got all these different people that was just amazing, talented players. Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, all these people that are amazing players, and they all look like me and you that dominate the sport. Even Larry Bird said that basketball is a so-called black man sport. Even Larry Bird said that from his own mouth. Why is it our sport? We created it. We created it, so it would only make sense that we would dominate something we create. It's common sense, man. So when people say things like, oh, why y'all don't speak the language, or why y'all don't do this? Because it is right here. It's just the people don't know that it came from indigenous culture. They didn't know gumbo was indigenous culture. They didn't know basketball was indigenous culture. We ain't never known that. We ain't know that pouring liquor up on the ground for our dead homies was Aboriginal American culture. We never knew that, but now you do know it. All right, y'all. All right. So today we're going to do part 2 of the stolen history of indigenous black Americans. All right, so this book is called The Early History of the Creek Indians and Their Neighbors. All right, this is referring to the Mesoamerican Indians. Watch how they describe them. It says the Spaniards have visited several regions of that vast country. They are called Arambre, Guacaya, Cuajata, Tanzaca, and Pahor. It says the color of the inhabitants is dark brown. None of them have any system of writing, but they preserve traditions of great antiquity in rhymes and chants. So they preserved their traditions of antiquity in the past, ancient times. They preserve them with rhymes and chants. They're rapping. Who does that sound like to you? Who dominates the rap industry? So-called African Americans, so-called black Americans. So it would only make sense that the people who dominated it is the one who created it. That would only make sense. So why are these people doing the same thing? Rhyming and chanting. We do the same thing today. The same, it has not changed in all these years from ancient times today. It's still the exact same way. And then it says, dancing and physical exercise are held in honor, and they are passionately fond of ball games in which they exhibit the greatest skill. They are passionately fond of ball games. What did I say in part 1? Basketball. We dominate basketball. It's the same thing. Nothing has changed. All right? It's the same exact thing today. That's why you got to learn how to correlate information with the past and bring it up to today so we can match it with the people that it actually belonged to. All right? But watch this. Let's move on. All right, now, so this book is called In the Hands of a Child, Mayans, Aztecs, and Incas by Kim Botelli. It says Mayan clothing. It says Mayan men usually wore a loincloth and women wore loose sack-like dresses. Personal appearance was very important to Mayan nobles who wore clothing made of the fine materials that were embellished with beads and shells. It says jewelry and hats were also important, and the Mayans believed that the bigger the hat, the more important the person. For ceremonies, they wore beautiful headdresses. It says the Maya also practiced body deformation. Nobles covered their bodies with tattoos, painted their bodies, and pierced their ears. In addition, some Mayans practiced tooth deformation. They filed their teeth down to a point and sharpened them and squared them off, and or drilled holes in them and placed small circular jade stones into the holes. What does that sound like to you? Teeth jewelry, gold teeth, diamonds in your teeth. What culture is that? What group of people on this planet started that? So-called African Americans, so-called black people. That is our culture. I told you, you cannot escape your Indian origin. You still do things today that your ancestors did in ancient times. You cannot escape it. You cannot escape it. It's still, watch this. Let's go on, and I'm going to show you even further, just in case you think I'm just making that up. This is the same book, American Indian Contributions to the World. This is a section called Dental Inlay. It says a dental inlay is a solid filling made to the precise shape of a cavity in a tooth and cemented into place. The Maya, whose culture arose about 1500 BC in Mesoamerica, were doing dental inlays before Columbus landed in the New World. They used jade for inlays as well as jet, gold, hematite, and turquoise. Sometimes these inlays were set into incisors and canines, and in some cases, they were set into premolars. Lower and upper teeth also had inlays set into them. Archaeological evidence suggests that most inlays were done for aesthetic purposes, and that the decorative inlays were a practice among the upper class of ancient Maya society. You see that? They were done for aesthetic purposes because they wanted to put diamonds and jewelry in their teeth. It's the same thing we do today. It's the same exact thing. Why you see all these rappers with multicolored diamonds and grills and all these different, they do the same thing just without drilling the holes in your teeth. It's the same thing. Nothing has changed from those times up until today. It's the same exact thing. This is an article on ancientorigins.net. It says jewel-capped teeth and golden bridges, 14,000 years of dentistry. Jewelry-capped teeth. Jewelry-capped teeth. What is that? That's gold teeth, ladies and gentlemen. Gold teeth, jewelry-capped teeth. We are that's our culture. That is black culture, okay? And I have to use the word black just so everybody know who we're talking about. That is black culture. We started it. It's our culture. Here's the section of the article that we need to read. It says Maya bling. It says the Maya are credited with being the masters of cosmetic dentistry, as they were known to decorate teeth by embedding them with precious stones or by carving notches and grooves into them. Tiny holes were chipped out of the teeth, and ornamental stones, including jade, were attached with an adhesive made out of natural resins, such as plant sap, which was mixed with other chemicals and crushed bones. The dentists likely had a sophisticated knowledge of tooth anatomy because they knew how to drill into teeth without hitting the pulp inside. It says in 2016, archaeologists unearthed the 1,600-year-old skeleton of an upper-class woman in Mexico's famous ruins of Teotihuacan. She had an elongated skull, a prosthetic tooth made of a green stone known as serpentine, and her top front teeth were encrusted with round pirate stones. This was a practice that was used among the nobility in Mayan regions in southern Mexico and Central America. Look at the teeth. They got all bling bling in the teeth, man. What culture? It's our culture. You cannot mistake that for no other culture. That's why I wanted to do this video. Because when I did my last video, you had people, trolls, coming in the comments, oh, you guys, blah, blah, blah. Listen, you can't mistake this for nobody else. This is so-called black culture. Why were those Mayans doing the same things we were doing? Why are they rapping and wearing gold teeth? Why? The same thing you do today. You are the same exact people from back then today. You have not lost sight of your history and your origin and your customs. You just didn't know it was your history, origins, and customs. But now you know.
All right, y'all. How about that? Okay. Now we're gonna be going back to the Moors, but let us deal with some of this Egyptians did. Okay, let's find out about that. What about the ancient Egyptians in the Americas? How about that? You know, because everybody pointed, well, you know, the Egyptians in Africa and in Africa and Africa and Africa. Well, what about my position? It goes like this: the ancient Egyptians. You want to call them Egyptians, which is Egypt, Greek word and all that right there. And I don't know who the hell the people over there now in North Africa are calling themselves Egyptians. For the life of me, I don't know what the heck that is. However, the ancient Egyptians was in the Americas first, left here, and went to North Africa. In other places on the way. They stopped in other places on the way. The doggone people, they tribe of the ancient Egyptians. We ain't going that deep right now, but what I want to do is take a look at and see what about the ancient Egyptians in the Americas. Can we shed any light on that?
We're going to talk about Judaism and Islam. Right now I want to stay with Christianity and the Holy Trinity. So many centuries ago, thousands of years ago, Isis, Horus, and Osiris were thought of as a Holy Trinity. By whom?
By the Greeks. The names Isis, Horus, and Osiris are Greek names. They're Greek names for African personalities. Now, we mentioned at the top of the show that I refer to myself as a memory recovery specialist. So let me just play that role for a second.
Please do.
We're here in Washington, D.C., and the most obvious symbol of the capital of the wealthiest and most powerful nation in human history is an object that is known as the Washington Monument.
Yes.
It stands in the geographical center of what was originally the 10-mile square of the capital of the United States of America. Now, that symbol is an ancient African symbol which represents the resurrection of an African king named Asar, whose name was later changed by the Greeks to Osiris. So that symbol is the oldest symbol of resurrection known to man. And I might add, Rock, that symbol was developed in Africa, principally in Kemet, the country that the Greeks renamed Egypt. That symbol is over 6,000 years old. And it represents a man, Asar, who was the founding father of Kemet, the nation of the black people. And Asar was murdered by his brother. His body was cut into a variety of pieces. One story says 14 pieces, and scattered throughout the land. Asar's wife, Aset, who is known as Isis to the Greeks, searched throughout the Nile River and found 13 of the 14 parts of Asar's body. She laid each of the pieces out and literally remembered her husband, washed his body with oils, wrapped his body in bandages, and created the first mummy in human history. And as she was about to bury her husband, she grieved, as any wife would grieve, because she was about to bury the man that she loved. She also grieved because, according to a story that is over 6,000 years old, a story with plenty of documentation that I see every year when I travel to Egypt, Aset was also a virgin. And before she buried her husband, the spirit of her deceased husband, Asar, came and impregnated her. And then 9 months later, the virgin Aset gave birth to this son, Heru. Now, according to some versions of the story, Heru was born 6,000 years ago on December the 25th. So we have, within the story of the founding Paris of ancient Kemet, Asar, Set, and Heru, the fundamental story that would later be incorporated into the Bible as the story of Jesus. And there are numerous parallels that, again, any person who is questioning what I'm saying, if they were to have a conversation with any trained priest or rabbi or bishop, someone who is going to divinity school, they know this story. And that is also the reason why you'll find this same symbol that looks like the Washington Monument. It was known originally as a tekken. We know it better by its Greek name, obelisk. They will find a tekken in the center of St. Peter's Square. So you have to ask the question, what is this African symbol of resurrection doing in the center of the Vatican, and why is it that every Easter Sunday, when the Pope stands on his balcony and delivers his sermon about the resurrection of Jesus Christ, there are 150,000 people standing in St. Peter's Square surrounding that Tekken, that oldest symbol of resurrection, and every pope knows that story. So it begs the issue that not only do people of African ancestry need to have their memories restored, but people of all nations need to know the greater truth of an African story that has been hidden from most people on this planet.
In 1993, I think it was, I was at the Vatican, and they took us on a tour. And I asked the tour guide, could he allow me to see the Black Madonna? I thought he was going to have a heart attack. Tell us about the Black Madonna.
Well, the Black Madonna, there are several Black Madonnas. Pope John Paul II is from Poland, Czeskokowa, and in Czeskokowa, they have a shrine of the Black Madonna. So every time the Pope went home, he would go and pray at the feet of the Black Madonna. The Black Madonna is the Greek version of Isis and Horus, which is the Europeanized version of Heru and Aset. So this story that I told earlier about Asar, Aset, and Heru, and the Virgin Aset being impregnated by the spirit of her husband Asar, and Aset giving birth to Heru on December the 25th. So if we follow that narrative, Aset was forced to flee for her life because the king of Kemet, Egypt at that time, Set, was looking to kill the sun. And so Aset and her son literally hid in the bulrushes. And I could take you to temples in Egypt and show you these images. And so she was, Aset and Heru were worshipped by the Greeks as the Black Madonna and Child. And then it was later, much later, that Eusebius took these ancient stories, took these ancient myths, and that's the essence of it. This story is mythology. It is not a historical fact, but it is a myth that is used to imbue people with a certain level of understanding so that they can relate to things beyond the physical. And so it was Eusebius who grafted these stories into the new narrative that they were creating in order to control the people physically, mentally, and spiritually.
You use the term myth.
Yes, sir.
Would you then suggest that the birth of Christ in the manger and the Holy Trinity is a myth also?
Rock, you're going to get me in trouble.
Okay. That's what we do.
But let me say this. I remember in 1981 reading John Jackson's book, The Introduction to African Civilization. And John Jackson was a brilliant human being. He probably had a photographic memory, a brilliant scholar. And in his book, Introduction to African Civilization, he talks about the Christ myth. Now, there's a book called 101 Myths of the Bible. There's a book by Kersey Graves called 16 Crucified Saviors. And in this book, we find that there are 16 historical personalities that grew out of myths about 16 personalities who also were the product of a virgin birth, who also were born on December the 25th, who also were symbolically crucified. So what you see in this narrative is that myths are powerful tools that may not necessarily be true, but they have truth in them. And so it's a means of telling a historical narrative across time and space such that everybody can relate to it. So in that context, if you like, I could break down the mythological elements of the story of the birth of Jesus Christ. And it's all based on historical facts and astronomical facts.
I'll tell you something. As the foundation of Christianity,
yes,
I'd like for you to take a stab at your thoughts on just that.
Well,
do that breakdown.
And let me put this in context, because I was born and raised in Chicago. I grew up in a Christian household. My grandmother was probably the most religious person I ever met in my life. She took me to church, and every time I went to church, I would ask questions. Yeah. Why don't I see people who look like me in the Bible? Why, and I asked, and she would say, just don't ask questions.
Yeah, like my mom did.
And so that developed in me an inquisitive mind, and led to me asking questions that I wasn't supposed to know the answers to. And when I, as a college student here at Howard, would go home and have conversations with my grandmother about some of the things that I was learning, I realized that my grandmother was not prepared for the information, to receive the information that I learned. But because I loved my grandmother, I respected her and didn't try to move her beyond where she was. Because she needed Christianity. She needed her belief in Jesus Christ in order to help her deal with life in Chicago in the 1960s. But what I know, based on studying history and science, is that the story of virgin births in many cultures is based on mythology. We're told that Jesus was born in a manger. We're told that 3 wise men came to visit him. They followed the star that was in the east. Now, this is based on astronomical phenomena, because around the time of December the 21st, we have the solstice, the winter solstice, which is the shortest day of the year. And from December the 21st through December the 24th, literally the sun is still, the length of the day does not increase nor decrease significantly. So the sun is still. On December the 25th, that is when it was written in ancient texts that the sun, the S-U-N, was born, because the day began to lengthen by approximately 1 minute per day. So at the time that the sun was born on December the 25th, that the constellation of Virgo was rising on the horizon, was halfway above the horizon, so it was said symbolically, metaphorically, that the sun, S-U-N, was born of a virgin, and at the same time the stable of Aegeus was rising in the east. So it was said that the sun was born in a stable, and that there were 3 stars that are the 3 stars in the belt of Orion that point to the star Sirius. Those 3 stars were known in ancient times as the 3 wise men. So if we look at the story of the birth of Jesus the Christ, it is a story of cultural significance, mythological significance, and astronomical significance that means 3 different things to people who have an awareness of the story and know how to interpret it.
Again, staying with Christianity still. We're governed, Christians are governed by their code of conduct on this earthly plane, is governed by the 10 Commandments.
Yes.
Is that the Word of God, or does that come from something called the Book of the Dead?
Well, I recall James Henry Breasted, who was a famous American Egyptologist at the University of Chicago, established the Oriental Institute in, I think, around 1935. James Henry Breasted got in trouble for saying that the 10 Commandments were derived from the 42 admonitions of Ma'at. What does that mean? Ma'at in ancient Kemet was the overriding force that governed everything in the universe. She represented the principles of justice, balance, harmony, and that there were 42 admonitions of Ma'at. Some of them were, I have not stolen, I have not robbed, I have not defrauded offerings, I have not polluted myself, I have not polluted the land, I have not committed adultery, I have not spoken ill against God. And so it is from the 42 admonitions of Ma'at that Moses derived the 10 Commandments. And so there is a profound difference between an admonition of Ma'at, where one declares your innocence and says, I have not done X, Y, and Z, and a commandment where people without a profound understanding of Ma'at must be commanded not to do things that a person in their right mind would know not to do. So these are cultural differences that are based upon another culture appropriating aspects of African culture and interpreting it through their own cultural lens.
Talk to us, you just mentioned Moses. Yes. So to help us understand that you're talking about sort of the beginning of time and the beginning of man, going back into ancient Egypt, which was originally Kemet. From whence comes the 3 religions? Tell us about the development of those 3 religions.
All right. Well, as I mentioned earlier, Africa is the birthplace of humanity.
Yes.
No question about that. And it's also in Africa where we have the birthplace of culture and civilization. And an important civilizing aspect of all culture is how people relate to the unseen presence of the forces of creation, which we today refer to as God. So we will find in ancient Kemet the very earliest examples of people identifying with this unseen force, which we today call God. Now, the ancient Egyptians did not have a religion per se. There was no word in their culture for religion, but they had a spiritual tradition. The ancient Egyptians, or Kemites, were responsible for giving us the word amen, a word that Jews use, Christians use and Muslims use. It is a word in the Kemetic language which means the unseen presence of the Creator. The unseen presence of the Creator. And so we have within this structure a people who understood that there is an invisible force that we can't see that affects everything on life. And through a process of identifying what they refer to as nature. Nature is a term that means the principle or aspects of the Creator. The mind of man is too weak, too small to understand the totality of the Creator. But by understanding the many fragments or parts of the visible manifestations of the Creator in the air, in the water, in the plants, we can come to know this force. And by knowing this force and incorporating this knowledge into our lives, we can cultivate a relationship where we lift ourselves up. So we have in Kemet the very first people who talked about a relationship with the unseen God. We have in Kemet the first temples that were built to acknowledge or to house the Spirit of God, and a process, rituals, if you will, for strengthening that relationship. And so the people of Kemet established the oldest culture known to man. It was in their day what the United States is today, the most powerful nation on the planet. So people came to Kemet from all over the world. People came without a religion, studied the spiritual traditions in Kemet, and then left with a concept which they then introduced to their people, which became known to them as religion. But if you look at the origins of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, you will see beyond a shadow of a doubt that they are rooted in ancient African spiritual traditions.
I want to talk about the pyramids after I have you to weigh in on this. I read a quote recently where Hippocrates gave great reverence and credibility. Today, doctors say the Hippocratic Oath. That's referring to Hippocrates, who was often thought and taught as the original doctor.
Right.
He gave credence and honored in his quotes Imhotep.
Right.
Who was Imhotep? And
well,
we probably don't have enough time for you to really...
I do the light version.
Please do.
In the Hippocratic Oath, Hippocrates says, I swear by the god Apollo and Asclepius, the god of medicine. Asclepius is the Greek name for Imhotep. Imhotep is regarded as the world's first multi-genius. Imhotep was the prime minister to the king Zoser, the man who, Imhotep was a person who designed and oversaw the construction of the first pyramid on the planet, the step pyramid at Saqqara for Zoser. Imhotep was the first physician in recorded history. Imhotep was also an architect and engineer.
Before you go beyond him being a physician.
Yes, sir.
A physician who had written out certain formulas of medicine that continue to be viable today.
Yes, sir. The first physicians, the first gynecologists, the first brain surgeons came out of Kemet. The first test by a physician to determine if a woman was pregnant was developed in Kemet. The first test to determine the sex of a baby was born in Kemet. So if you had all of this knowledge happening in Africa back at least, I would say at least 1000 BC, then it would make sense that others would come here to learn this science and then go home and then declare themselves to be the originator of medicine or the originator of philosophy, which is essentially what the Greeks did. But in their early writings, they acknowledged the fact that this source of information came out of the Nile Valley, came out of Egypt.
I've got people in my family who hit me across my head and say that everything about that you're talking about in ancient Egypt was paganism.
Well, all pagan means is someone whose belief is other than your own. So in that context, to a Christian, a Muslim is pagan. You know, to a Jew, a Christian is pagan. And if we think about this in that larger context, you know, the Jewish people were responsible for giving us the Torah, first 5 books of Moses, the Old Testament, and then the New Testament was built on that foundation. Well, no one really questions the fact that within the Jewish faith, they don't acknowledge Jesus as the Messiah. But no one questions them on that or challenges them on that because they are the chosen people. But what most people don't really understand is that the knowledge that is inherent within, much of the knowledge that is inherent within the Jewish tradition comes straight out of the Nile Valley. Sigmund Freud knew that. In the book that was published shortly after his death, Moses and Monotheism, Sigmund Freud said that the origins of Judaism are Egyptian, that Moses was an Egyptian, and there are many other scholars who have advanced this work, and it's talked about in small quarters of the world, but it's information that hasn't made its way to the general public.
Something happened to me.
All right, everybody, we're back. I want to move on now back to the Moors, okay? But I'm going to take another commercial break, and we'll be back. Here, hold on a minute.
Let me make sure I got this one right also. Someone tells you that you must pay them money about your children in the form of child support. They also say they would suspend your driver's license. And they said they would garnish your wages. Who were they talking to? A debtor? Or did they make the mistake and say it to a creditor? When you got married, they said it was a part of that also. Request my free report at tarhakadebtelimination.org. That's tarhakadebtelimination.org. Let's have some fun. Fill out the contact us form for my free report, and I'll rush it straight to your email box. What about this banking stuff? What's going on in the United States? I tell you what, request my free report at tarhakadebtelimination.org. Peace. If it is against the law for the bank to loan out depositors' money to you, how could the bank give you a loan? And if that's the case, how are they able to keep their doors open? And in some cities, they have the biggest buildings in town. What happens to the person who deposits money in the bank? What do they receive outside of nickels and dimes in the form of what's called interest? How can you get paid? Go to tarhakadebtelimination.org. That's tarhakadebtelimination.org. Fill out the contact us form, and I'll rush you my free report. Let's get down to the bottom of this situation. Let me show you how what's going on in how to deal with it. Okay, tarhakadebtelimination.org. Peace, y'all.
I'm and named that land the beautiful land. The word for beautiful, Mary. M-A-R-E in some spellings, Mary. And the land means Ta, T-A, Ta, the land of. Beautiful land, Ta Mary. And Ta Mary is still applied to the land. And just as the ancient Africans said, there is a northland and a southland. Now we have North to Mary and South to Mary. We simply move the Ta to the end of the word and call it America. South America, North America, you're living in the land that was named by Egypt. Here are your Moors, who are named from Tamari, from the M and the R. You get your Moor.
Popping, I'm a threat, I'm a god, you can check me with this knowledge more. If you ain't up on knowledge, you ain't popping, nigga. If you ain't up on knowledge, you ain't popping, nigga. If you ain't got this knowledge, you ain't popping, nigga. If you ain't got this knowledge, you ain't popping. If you ain't got this knowledge, you ain't popping. If you don't love what you do, then what's the object? They rapping about some bullshit, I keep it conscious. We can go toe to toe, eye to eye, Fetty Wap and Lion. I'm moving mountains, carry hell, son, no buckers. Fuck the judge, sending shots to your honor. Balance energies, aligning up my chakras. Turn my noodles into pasta, atheist into a rock.
Alright, it's your boy Pell. I want to talk about some Moorish history. My cousin Arthur Grant hit me up, tagged me about one of his friends is a Moor, and my cousin Arthur is also a Moor, right? Because I'm for the show how black people are Moors, right? But the history that we get about Moors, it get confused because we're not really studying everything, right? Because sometimes we hear Moor, we be like, oh, over here in North Africa, over there in Africa, right? Now, knowing Moor is just another word for African or Indian, right? because Moors just really mean dark-skinned people. Black people are dark-skinned. So let me show you something. Watch this. This is written by Charles Jerry Ingersoll, House Representatives, Friday, January 3rd, 1845, in regards to the annexation of Texas. Now, I thought not written. This is something he spoke. Somebody spoke this, right, in Congress. This is a Congress, right, United States Congress, about regards to the annexation of Texas, because Texas was once really is part of Mexico, right? And so this is what he said. He said, the stupendous deserts between the Nueces and Bravo rivers are the natural boundaries between the Anglo-Saxons and the Mauritanian races. There ends the Valley of the West. There Mexico begins. Thence beyond the Bravo begin the Moorish people and their Indian associates, to whom Mexico properly belongs, who should not cross that vast desert. If they could, as on our side we too opt to stop there, because internal conflicts must ensue, either our going south or them coming north of that gigantic boundary. While peace is cherished, that boundary will be sacred, not till the spirit of the conquest rages, with the people on either side molest or mix with each other, and whenever they do, one of the other races must be conquered, if not extinguished. Now before I get, look what he said. Either side molest or mix with each other, and whenever they do, one of the other race must be conquered, if not extinguished. That's interesting, right? Okay, now we want to go read this lady right here. This book called, her name is Zella Nuttall, in a book called Archaeological and Ethical Papers of the Peabody Museum, Harvard University, Volume 1, Number 1, Standard or Hard Dress, and Historical Essay on the Relic of Ancient Mexico, page 6, 1888, right? And so she says, the term Moorish, as here applied, can scarcely be regarded as deceptive one, as a deceptive one, inasmuch as Montezuma, the king of Timistitan in Mexico, is subsequently designated as a Moorish king in this same inventory of 1596. Montezuma, the king of Timistitan in Mexico, is subsequently designated as a Moorish king in this very same inventory of 1596. In 1613, a description was faithfully reproduced. In 1621, the word Indian was substituted for Moorish. That's interesting, right? Montezuma, the Moorish king. The word Indian being substituted for Moorish. But you saw in 1845, the guy said what? The Moors and the Indians. But now they using the word interchangeably. And now you got here, they said Montezuma, the king of Timistitan in Mexico, was called the Moorish king. Okay. Okay, so now we're going to go back to this guy. This is written in what? This is Bernard L. Bouvier del Fontenelle, Conversation of the Fluidity of Worlds, 1686, page 83, right? 1686. He said, I can tell from what the inhabitants of Venus are like. They resemble the Moors of Granada, a small black people, burnt by the sun, full of wit, fire, always in love, writing in verse, fond of music, arranging festivals, time every day. But he said the Moors of the inhabitants of Venus are like. They resemble the Moors of Granada, a small black people. So you just saw what they said. They used the word Moor and Indian interchangeably, but the word Moor also means black people. Right? And this is 1686, right? We ain't got 1900s yet, right? Hold on. I forget the Robin Hood movie. Watch this.
Curse on Moors and Saracens. Were it not for their ungodly ways, Master Robin would never have left. What manner of name is Hazim? Irish?
Osio, Ale, Didanilasti, Dawadan, Sonoi, Wahya. Hello and welcome. My name is Sonoi Wahya, or in English, Nightwolf.
Queen Mu, also known as Queen Mu of Copan, was a significant figure in the ancient Maya civilization. She ruled the city-state of Copan, located in present-day Honduras. During the 7th century AD, Queen Mu was renowned for her intelligence, leadership, and contributions to the arts and culture of Copan. Under Queen Mu's reign, Copan experienced a period of prosperity and artistic flourishing. She was known to be a patron of the arts, particularly in the fields of sculpture, architecture, and pottery. Many impressive structures, such as temples and palaces, were built during her rule, showcasing the advanced architectural techniques of the Maya civilization. Additionally, Queen Mu supported the development of Copan's intricate hieroglyphic writing system. This system allowed the Maya to record their history, religious beliefs, and achievements. The hieroglyphic stairway, a grand stone staircase inscribed with hieroglyphs, is one of the most famous examples of Queen Mu's contributions to the written record of the Maya. Queen Mu's reign came to an end with the decline of Copan and the collapse of the classic Maya civilization. Despite this, her legacy as a powerful and influential ruler continues to captivate historians and archaeologists, shedding light on the rich cultural heritage of the Maya people. With this, we are going to look at the book Queen Mu and the Egyptian Sphinx by Augustus Leplongeon, author of Sacred Mysteries Among the Mayas and the Quiches, a sketch of the ancient inhabitants of Peru and their civilization.
To accept any authority as final, and to dispense with the necessity of independent investigation, is destructive of all progress. From Man by Two Cellas. What you have learned, verify by experience, otherwise learning is vain. This is an Indian saying. In this work I offer no theory. In questions of history, theories prove nothing. They are therefore out of place. I leave my readers to draw their own inferences from the facts presented for their consideration. Whatever he their conclusions is no concern of mine. One thing, however, is certain: neither their opinion nor mine will alter events that have happened in the dim past of which so little is known today. A record of many of these events has reached our times, written by those who took part in them, in a language still spoken by several thousands of human beings. There we may read part of man's history and follow the progress of his civilization. The study in situ of the relics of the ancient Mayas has revealed such striking analogies between their language, their religious conceptions, their cosmogonic notions, their manners and customs, their traditions, their architecture, and the language, the religious conceptions, the cosmogonic notions, the manners and customs, the traditions, the architecture of the ancient civilized nations of Asia, Africa, and Europe, of which we have any knowledge, that it has become evident, to my mind at least, that such similarities are not merely effects of hazard, but the result of intimate communication that must have existed between all of them, and that distance was no greater obstacle to their intercourse than it is today to that of the inhabitants of the various countries. It has been, and still is, a favorite hypothesis with certain students of ethnology that the Western continent, now known as America, received its human population, therefore its civilization, from Asia. True, there is a split in their ranks. They are not quite certain if the immigration in America came from Tartary across the Strait of Bering, or from Hindustan over the wastes of the Pacific Ocean. This, however, is of little consequence. There are those who pretend, like Klaproth, that the cradle of humanity is to be found on the plateau of Pamir, between the high peaks of the Himalayan ranges, or like Messrs. Enon and Bartholomew, St. Hilaire, who place it in the region of the Timaeus, in the countries where the Bible says the Garden of Eden was situated, while others are equally certain man came from Lemuria, that submerged continent invented by P.L. Sclater, which Haeckel one believes was the birthplace of the primitive ape man, and which they say now lies under the waves of the Indian Ocean. The truth of the matter is that these opinions are mere conjectures, simple hypotheses, and their advocates know no more, when and where man first appeared on earth, than the newborn babe knows of his surroundings, or how he came. The learned wranglers on this shadowy and dim point, one Haeckel, Ernst, Hist, of creation, forget that all leading geologists now agree in the opinion that America is the oldest known continent on the face of the planet, that the fossil remains of human beings found in various parts of it, far distant from each other, prove that man lived there in times immemorial, and that we have not the slightest ray of light to illumine the darkness that surrounds the origin of those primeval men. Furthermore, it is now admitted by the generality of scientists that man, far from descending from a single pair, located in a particular portion of the Earth's surface, has appeared on every part of it, where the biological conditions have been propitious to his development and maintenance, and that the production of the various species, with their distinct, well-marked anatomical and intellectual characteristics, was due to the difference of those biological conditions, and to the general forces calling forth animal life prevalent in the places where each particular species has appeared, and whose distinctive marks were adapted to its peculiar environments. The Maya sages doubtless had reached similar conclusions, since they called their country Mayach. That is, the land first emerged from the bosom of the deep, the country of the chute, and the Egyptians, according to Herodotus, boasted that their ancestors, in the lands of the West, were the oldest men on earth. If the opinion of Lyell, Humphrey, and a host of modern geologists regarding the priority of America's antiquity be correct, what right have we to gainsay the assertion of the Mayas and of the Egyptians, in claiming likewise priority for their people and their country? It is but natural to suppose that intelligence in man was developed on the oldest continent, among its most ancient inhabitants, and that its concomitant, civilization, grew apace with its development. When, at the impulse of the instinct of self-preservation, men linked themselves into clans, tribes, and nations, history was born, and with it a desire to commemorate the events of which it is composed. The art of drawing or writing was then invented. The incidents regarded as most worthy of being remembered and preserved for the knowledge of coming generations were carved on the most enduring material in their possession, stone. And so it is that we find today the cosmogonic and religious notions, the records of natural phenomena and predominant incidents in the history of their nation, and that of their rulers, sculptured on the walls of the temples and palaces of the civilized Mayas, Chaldeans, and Egyptians, as on the sacred rocks and in the hallowed caves of primitive uncivilized man. It is to the monumental inscriptions and to the books of the Mayas that we must turn if we wish to learn about the primeval traditions of mankind, the development of civilization, and the events that took place centuries before the dim myths recorded as occurrences at the beginning of our written history. Historians, when writing on the universal history of the race, have never taken into consideration that of man in America, and the role that in remote ages American nations played on this world stage, and the influence they exerted over the populations of Asia, Africa, and Europe. Still, as far as we can scan the long vista of the past centuries, the Mayas seem to have had direct and intimate communications with them. This fact is indeed no new revelation, as proved by the universality of the name Maya, which seems to have been as well known by all civilized nations thousands of years ago as is today that of the English. Thus we meet with it in Japan, the islands of the Pacific, Hindustan, Asia Minor, Egypt, Greece, Equatorial Africa, North and South America, as well as in the countries known to us as Central America, which in those times composed the Maya Empire. The seat of the government and residence of the rulers was the peninsula of Yucatan. Wherever found, the name Maya is synonymous with power, wisdom, and learning. The existence of the western continent was no more a mystery to the inhabitants of the countries bordering on the Mediterranean than to those whose shores are bathed by the waves of the Indian Ocean. Valmiki, in his beautiful epic the Ramayana, says that, in times so remote that the sun had not yet risen above the horizon, the Mayas, great navigators, terrible warriors, learned architects, conquered the southern parts of the Indo-Chinese peninsula and established themselves there. In the classic authors, Greek and Latin, we find frequent mention of the great Saturnian continent, distant many thousand stadia from the Pillars of Hercules toward the setting sun. Plutarch, in his Life of Solon, says that when the famed Greek legislator visited Egypt, 600 years before the Christian era, Sanchis, a priest of Sais, also Xenophon, a priest of Heliopolis, told him that 9,000 years since, the relations of the Egyptians with the inhabitants of the lands of the West had been interrupted because of the mud that had made the sea impassable after the destruction of Atlantis by earthquakes. The same author again, in his work, Tephaesi and Orb Lunas, has Sylar recount to his brother Lampius all he had learned concerning them from a stranger he met at Carthage returning from the transatlantic countries, that the western continent was visited by Carthaginians a few years before the inditing of Plato's Atlantis. The portraits of men with long beards and Phoenician features, discovered by me in 1875, sculptured on the columns and ante of the castle at Chichen, bear witness. Diodorus Siculus attributes the discovery of the western continent to the Phoenician, and describes it as a country where the landscape is varied by very lofty mountains, and the temperature is always soft and equable. Procopius, alluding to it, says it is several thousand stadia from Ajija, and encloses the whole sea, into which a multitude of rivers, descending from the highlands, discharge their waters. Theopompus, of Quio, speaking of its magnitude, says, compared with it, our world is but a small island, and Cicero, mentioning it, makes use of nearly the same words, omnes in inter squas collider vobis parva quaesedum est insula. Aristotle in his work, De Mirabili Auscultatio, giving an account of it, represents it as a very large and fertile country, well watered by abundant streams, and he refers to a decree enacted by the Senate of Carthage toward the year 509 BC, intended to stem the current of emigration that had set toward the western lands, as they feared it might prove detrimental to the prosperity of their city. The belief in the former existence of extensive lands in the middle of the Atlantic, and their submergence in consequence of seismic convulsion, existed among scientists even as far down as the 5th century of the Christian era. Proclus, one of the greatest scholars of antiquity, who during 35 years was at the head of the Neoplatonic school of Athens, and was learned in all the sciences known in his days, in his commentaries on Plato's Timsius, says, "The famous Atlantis exists no longer, but we can hardly doubt that it did once." For Marcellus, who wrote a history of Ethiopian affairs, says that such and so great an island once existed, and that it is evidenced by those who compose histories relative to the external sea. For they relate that in this time there were 7 islands in the Atlantic Sea sacred to Proserpine. Besides these, 3 of immense magnitude, sacred to Pluto, Jupiter, and Neptune, and, besides this, the inhabitants of the last island, Poseidonis, preserve the memory of the prodigious magnitude of the Atlantic island as related by their ancestors, and of its governing for many periods all the islands in the Atlantic Sea. From this isle one may pass to other large islands beyond, which are not far from the firm land near which is the true sea. It is well to notice that, like all the Maya authors who have described the awful cataclysm that caused the submergence of the land of Mu, Proclus mentions the existence of 10 countries or islands, as Plato did. Can this be a mere coincidence, or was it actual geographical knowledge on the part of these writers? Inquiries are often made as to the causes that led to the interruption of the communications between the inhabitants of the western continent and the dwellers on the coasts of the Mediterranean, after they had been renewed by the Carthaginians. It is evident that the mud spoken of by the Egyptian priests had settled in the course of centuries, and that the seaweeds mentioned by Ilomilco had ceased to be a barrier, sufficient to impede the passage, since Carthaginians reached the shores of Yucatan at least 500 years before the Christian era.
Now, we will take a short moment to explain the material we have just covered. The author emphasizes that theories are not necessary in understanding history and that the facts speak for themselves. He believes that the similarities between the Mayan civilization and those of other continents are not coincidental and suggests that there was communication between these civilizations. The author notes that the name Maya was well known across the world, from Japan to Equatorial Africa, indicating that the influence of the Mayans was widespread. The author also discusses the belief in the former existence of extensive lands in the middle of the Atlantic, which were said to have been submerged due to seismic convulsions. He cites the work of ancient scholars like Proclus, who wrote about the lost continent of Atlantis and believes that such legends may have had a basis in reality. Overall, the author argues that historians have overlooked the role of our early American nations in world history, and that there is much to be learned from studying the ancient Mayan civilization. I reserve the teachings that may be gathered from the study of Maya monuments for a future occasion, restricting my observations now principally to the Memorial Hall at Chichen, dedicated to the remains of Prince Ko by his sister wife Queen Mu, and to the mausoleum erected by her order to contain his effigy and his cremated remains. In the first, she caused to be painted on the walls of the funeral chamber the principal events of his and her life, just as the Egyptian kings had the events of their own lives painted on the walls of their tombs. Language is admitted to be a most accurate guide in tracing the family relation of various peoples, even when inhabiting countries separated by vast extents of land or water. In the present instance, Maya, still spoken by thousands of human beings, and in which the inscriptions sculptured on the walls of the temples and palaces in the ruined cities of Tukatan are written, as are also the fair books of the ancient Maya sages that have come to our hands, will be the thread of Ariadne that will guide us in following the tracks of the colonists from Mayach in their peregrinations. In every locality where their name is found, there also we meet with their language, their religious and cosmogonic notions, their traditions, customs, architecture, and a host of other indications of their presence and permanency, and of the influence they have exerted on the civilization of the aboriginal inhabitants. My readers will judge for themselves of the correctness of this assertion. The reading of the Maya inscriptions and books, among other very interesting subjects, reveals the origin of many narratives that have come down to us as traditions in the sacred books of various nations, and which are regarded by many as inexplicable myths. For instance, we find in them the history of certain personages who, after their death, became the gods most universally revered by the Egyptians, Isis and Osiris, whose earthly history, related by Wilkinson and other writers who regard it as a myth, corresponds exactly to that of Queen Mu and her brother husband Prince Ko. whose charred heart was found by me, preserved in a stone urn in his mausoleum at Chichen. Osiris, we are told, was killed by his brother through jealousy and because his murderer wished to seize the reins of the government. He made war against a widow, his own sister, whom he came to hate bitterly after having been madly in love with her. In these same books we learn the true meaning of the tree of knowledge in the middle of the garden, of the temptation of the woman by the serpent offering her a fruit. This offering of a fruit as a declaration of love, which was a common occurrence in the everyday life of the Mayas, Egyptians, and Greeks, loses all the seeming incongruity it presents in the narrative of Genesis for lack of a word of explanation. But this shows how very simple facts have been, and still are, made use of by crafty men, such as the high priest Hilkiah, to devise religious speculations and impose on the good faith of ignorant, credulous, and superstitious masses. It is on this story of the courting of Queen Mu by Prince Ah, the murder of her husband purposely disfigured by the scheming Jewish priest Hilkiah, who made the woman appear to have yielded to her tempter, perhaps out of spite against the prophetess Huldah, she having refused to countenance his fraud and to become his accomplice in it, that rests the whole fabric of the Christian religion, which, since its advent in the world, has been the cause of so much bloodshed and so many atrocious crimes. In these Maya writings we also meet with the solution of that much mooted question among modern scientists, the existence, destruction, and submergence of a large island in the Atlantic Ocean, as related by Plato in his Timaeus and Critias, in consequence of earthquakes and volcanic eruptions, of this dreadful cataclysm in which perished 64 millions of human beings. 4 different authors have left descriptions in the Maya language. 2 of these narratives are illustrated, that contained in the Trono and Mess, the other in the Codex Cordizenus. The third has been engraved on stone in relief and placed for safekeeping in a room in a building at Chichen, where it exists today, sheltered from the action of the elements and preserved for the knowledge of coming generations. The fourth was written thousands of miles from Mayach in Athens, the brilliant Grecian capital, in the form of an epic poem in the Maya language. Each line of said poem, formed by a composed word, is the name of one of the letters of the Greek alphabet, rearranged, as we have it, 403 years before the Christian era, under the archonship of Enclides. Fleeing from the wrath of her brother Ah, Queen Mu directed her course toward the rising sun in the hope of finding shelter in some of the remnants of the land of Mu, as the Azores, for instance. Failing to fall in with such place of refuge as she was seeking, she continued her journey eastward, and at last reached the Maya colonies that for many years had been established on the banks of the Nile. The settlers received her with open arms, called her the little sister, Isis, and proclaimed her their queen. Before leaving her mother country in the west, she had caused to be erected, not only a memorial hall to the memory of her husband, but also a superb mausoleum in which were placed his remains and a statue representing him. On the top of the monument was his totem, a dying leopard with a human head, a veritable sphinx, in ages long lost in the abyss of time, when Aryan colonists had not yet established their first settlements on the banks of the river Saraswati in the Punjab, and the primitive Egyptian settlers in the valley of the Nile did not fancy, even in their most hopeful daydreams, that their descendants would become the great people whose civilization was to be the cradle of that of Europe. There existed on the western continent a nation, the Maya, that had attained to a high degree of culture in arts and sciences. Valmiki, in his beautiful epic the Ramayana, which is said to have served as model to Homer's Iliad, tells us that the Mayas were mighty navigators, whose ships traveled from the western to the eastern ocean, from the southern to the northern seas, in ages so remote that the sun had not yet risen above the horizon. That, being likewise great warriors, they conquered the southern parts of the Hindustan peninsula, and established themselves there, that being also learned architects, they built great cities and palaces. These Mayas became known in after times under the names of the Navas, they who live in the midst of the water, and are regarded by modern historians as aborigines of the country, or Nagas, as we shall see later on. The traditions of the Nagas are obscure in the extreme. They point, however, to the existence of an ancient Nagi empire in the Deccan, having its capital in the modern town of Nagpur, and it may be conjectured that, prior to the Aryan invasion, the Naga Rajas exercised an imperial power over the greatest part of the Punjab and Hindustan. The Nagas, or serpent worshippers, who lived in crowded cities and were famous for their beautiful women and exhaustless treasures, were doubtless a civilized people living under an organized government. Indeed, if any inference can be drawn from the epic legends, it would be that, prior to the Aryan conquest, The Naga Rajas were ruling powers who had cultivated the arts of luxury to an extraordinary degree and yet succeeded in maintaining a protracted struggle against the Aryan invaders. Like the English of today, the Mayas sent colonists all over the earth. These carried with them the language, the traditions, the architecture, astronomy, cosmogony, and other sciences, in a word, the civilization of their mother country. It is this civilization that furnishes us with the means of ascertaining the role played by them in the universal history of the world. We find vestiges of it and of their language in all historical nations of antiquity in Asia, Africa, and Europe. They are still frequent in the countries where they flourished. It is easy to follow their tracks across the Pacific to India by the imprints of their hands dipped in a red liquid and pressed against the walls of temples, caves, and other places looked upon as sacred. To implore the benison of the gods also by their name, Maya, given to the banana tree, symbol of their country, whose broad leaf is yet a token of hospitality among the natives of the islands. Then along the shores of the Indian Ocean and those of the Persian Gulf to the mouth of the Euphrates, up that river to Babylon, the renowned city of the sun, thence across the Syrian desert to the valley of the Nile, where they finally settled and gave the name of their mother country to a district of Nubia, calling it Mayu or Mayu. After becoming firmly established in Egypt, they sent colonists to Syria. These reached as far north as Mount Taurus, founding on their way settlements along the coast of the Mediterranean, in Sidon, Tyre, the valley of the Orontes, and again on the banks of the Euphrates, to the north of Babylon and Mesopotamia. Maach, that is the land that first arose from the bottom of the deep, was the name of the empire whose sovereigns bore the title of Khan, serpent, spelled today Khan, in Asiatic countries. This title, given by the Mayas to their rulers, was derived from the contour of the empire, that of a serpent with inflated breasts, which in their books and their sculptures they represented sometimes with, sometimes without wings, as the Egyptians did the uraeus, symbol of their country. The Elian says, it was the custom of the Egyptian kings to wear asps of different colors in their crowns. The Maya Empire comprised all the lands between the Isthmus of Tehuantepec and that of Darien, known today as Central America. The history of the sovereigns that had governed it and of the principal events that had taken place in the nation was written in well-bound books of papyrus or parchment, covered with highly ornamented wooden boards. This bird, symbol of the principal female divinity, is met with in every country where Maya civilization can be traced in Polynesia, Japan, India, Chaldea, Egypt, Greece, as in Maach in the ancient city of Tiahuanaco on the high plateaus of the Peruvian Andes. In Egypt, the vulture formed the headdress of the goddess Isis, or Mau, whose vestments were dyed with a variety of colors imitating feather work. Everywhere it is a myth. In Maach only we may perhaps find the origin of this myth, since it was the totem of Queen Mu, whose name means Macaw, and she is generally pictured in the sculptures and inscriptions by the figure of that beautiful bird, whose plumage is composed of brilliant feathers of various colors. Now, I would like to make a short overview of what we've just covered. In this passage, the author discusses various topics related to the Maya civilization and its influence on other ancient cultures. They begin by describing the memorial hall at Chichen, dedicated to Prince Ko by his sister wife Queen Mu. The author compares this to the Egyptian practice of painting the events of a king's life on the walls of their tombs. The author then emphasizes the importance of language in tracing the family relations of different peoples. They mention that the Maya language, still spoken by many people, is used in inscriptions on Maya monuments and in ancient Maya books. This language serves as a guide in understanding the presence and influence of Maya colonists in different locations. The author suggests that studying Maya inscriptions and books can help us understand the origin of certain narratives and traditions. For example, they mention the similarities between the stories of Queen Mu and Prince Ko and the Egyptian gods Isis and Osiris. They argue that these similarities reveal the true history behind what is often considered myth. The author also discusses the significance of certain symbols and myths found in Maya culture. They mention the tree of knowledge in the garden and the temptation of the woman by the serpent, which they argue can be understood within the context of Maya customs and traditions. The passage then shifts to discuss the Maya as a seafaring nation and their colonization efforts. The author suggests that the Maya sent colonists all over the world, spreading their language, traditions, and civilization. They mention the presence of Maya influences in historical nations of antiquity in Asia, Africa, and Europe. The author concludes by discussing the Maya Empire, which encompassed Central America. They mention that the history of the Maya rulers and important events was written in well-bound books. They also note the significance of the vulture, which was the totem of Queen Mu and can be found in various ancient cultures. Overall, the passage provides a detailed exploration of various aspects of Maya civilization, including their monuments, language, traditions, and influence on other cultures. and this will conclude episode 1 of Queen Mu and the Egyptian Sphinx.
All right, we're back, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to go to my final commercial break. But what I want you to know, this next commercial that I'm going to run, even though you've heard it before, I want you to know that this actually happened in real life. In the company that I'm working for, is when this happened, and what the brother had said to me. One day, I was out there, because I had, when I come to work, I'm not coming to work to sit down with you to talk about football. I don't want to have to sit down outside on my lunch break for you to start telling me about who's going to bed with who and what woman is signing up. I don't want to hear none of that. When I come to work, I got books that I'm going to invest my time in reading. I got my little, well, not a laptop, but a little video player so I can look at it and get the educational materials that I need to go and have before I go to my next break. And this went on for a while, but one day we had, I went on break when the engineers was outside. And the majority of them were white folks. And when we had a brother, he come out there, and he go try to get me in front of the white folks. And I said, well, you know, he prejudiced against white people. You know, I'm telling you right now, you know, I've been checking him out. He prejudiced against white folks. And I'm like, well, hey, man, why are you insulting me? I said, I've never insulted you. Why, you know, I consider that to be an insult. So now here go the engineer, the white engineer, he said, well, I'm trying to figure this out. How could you say that? That's an insult. I said, well, I'm going to tell you, man. I said, first of all, I said, why would I be envious of you, jealous of you, prejudiced against you, when it is my people who built the greatest empire the world has ever seen in the history of this world? I said, I don't, you know, to me, I have to regard that as an insult, because we had dealt with the entire world and ruled Europe, Spain, the Americas, long before there was any such thing as a place called Europe. So I have to consider that as an insult. Anyway, we finished running commercial, and we finished going down into the broadcast. Hold on.
When it comes to relationships between debtors and creditors, what's the difference? Have you ever seen a debtor try to function in the private? Let me tell you, it's a sight to see. It's like the man who found out I hadn't eaten any meat in 8 months. He rushed up to me and told me he found out I hadn't eaten any meat in 8 months, and that I better eat something quick before it's too late. Get out of the public and into the private. Get my free report by filling out the Contact Us form at TarhakaDebtElimination.org. That's TarhakaDebtElimination.org. When you fill out that Contact Us form, I'll rush you my free report straight to your email box, and that way you'll be able to contact me, and we can work on getting you out of the public and into the private. Okay? TarhakaDebtElimination.org. Peace.
You can't look at the mass incarceration numbers and not know that this is systemic targeting. Mass incarceration of members of the global majority in the United States, who are then forced to work as slave labor for private enterprise in prison, often for the rest of their lives. This is systemic population reduction of so-called minority communities through extrajudicial killing and detention. Well, that's nothing but a form of ethnic cleansing. But again, they make you think it's normal. It's not normal. It's criminal. And it's a crime against humanity. It's a violation of international law. And you are members of the international community, whether you realize it or not. Your government, your system, has got you believing that international law doesn't apply to you. Well, why do you suppose they made you think that? They don't want you to know that their treatment of you is not normal, that it's not civilized, and that it's not legal. They have you thinking that you have the most rights of any people on earth, the most freedom of any people on earth, and so on. And that's precisely because you don't. The idea of raising kids in the West is terrifying to me. It's absolutely terrifying to me. I don't know how any of you do it. I don't know how you do it. Wallahi, I don't know how you do it. It's very disturbing to think about raising children in the West. And you know, the fuqaha used to have a position. You can go to the lands of the kuffar. You can even marry in the lands of the kuffar. But the advice was always don't have children there. This is very, very, very foresightful of fuqaha because it's very difficult. Children are too influenced by their peers. And the way the school system is, okay, I'm an advocate of homeschooling. If you can do it without it hindering the academic level of your children, their actual education. As long as they can actually get a good quality education and you can afford to homeschool and you have the capacity to homeschool and so on, then of course I advocate homeschooling. And I don't worry, especially in the Muslim community, I don't worry about the potential downside of homeschooling, which is that the children don't get socialized. Because in the Muslim community, of course, they'll get socialized. If you're active in the community, you're active in the masajid and so on, then the kids will interact with other kids. You know, that's just how we are. So that's not an issue. The way the education system is, it's really astonishing to me, to be honest. You agree to be away from your children for most of their waking hours. And then teachers get to say, you can't expect us to raise your kids. You know, and that's okay, that's a valid argument. I'm here to teach your kids the ABCs, or reading, writing, arithmetic, and so on. I'm not here to raise your kids. Okay, but you've got them more than I do. The state requires me to let you have my children and spend more time with my children than I can spend with my children. So I'm supposed to raise them in the 2 hours that I have? The 3 hours that I have with them before they sleep? That's when I'm supposed to raise them? Well, who's supposed to raise them then? The school that says that it's not their responsibility to raise them? Or the parent who doesn't even have the time and the opportunity to actually raise them because by law I have to give them over to you for most of their waking hours, you know? And then the other side of that, of course, is the economic system, which requires you to work anyway. So you have to put your kids somewhere while you're working because you can't pay for child care, you know? So it's an impossible situation. Wallahi, it's a very, very it's a very destructive and toxic society, and again, so-called civilization. It's very toxic that you must give up your children, and like I said, the teachers have fair enough the argument, I'm not getting paid to raise your children. Well, then who's going to do that job? That's a job that requires time and attention, and you have them more than I have them. Literally, you have them more than I have them. So no, it's a very scary thought to me, the idea of raising children in the West. It's a terrifying thought. I'm afraid I can't advise, because my advice to myself at that time was to get out of there and not put my children through that, not put myself through the experience of trying to struggle to raise them properly in that environment. So I found it myself to be an impossible task, that the only solution to which was to not do it and to get out and try and raise my children elsewhere.
What factors do you think generally, or even specifically, contribute to the compromise of critical thought?
If you live in the West, the main factors are just the environment itself, the culture itself. There's so many reasons why. I mean, if you could choose almost any point in the history of Western so-called civilization, and you'll find reasons why critical thinking was discouraged or was completely absent from the society, discouraged from the society, and overall prevented. It's a constant, actually, in the West. Going back as far as you want to go, you know, they hype themselves up as being, you know, the very logical, rational. You know, the Enlightenment was all about rationality and reason and so on. But this has never been the case. This is completely this is a self-description. and false advertising. If we were looking at just now, in the modern age, say the 20th century, 21st century, they have a very obvious motive for discouraging or subverting the cultivation of critical thinking. And that's the very simple fact that if the people of the West and America in particular, if they were critical thinkers, then every Western economy would collapse. De facto social order would collapse. The political system would collapse. The way the whole society is managed relies on the population not being critical thinkers. In terms of the economy, mass production is the basis of every industrial economy. And in order for mass production to not result in the production of wasteful surplus of identical standardized goods, then you need to make people make their consumer choices without any hint of critical thought. They need to be impulse driven. They need to buy on impulse, on feeling, on an irrational sense of brand loyalty. You know, all of these things that the advertising industry exists to do. They need to not buy on the basis of what they need and what actually makes sense, what's actually, you know, a sensible, rational purchase. They need to somehow believe that this, you know, this vast variety of basically completely identical goods, identical products. They need to believe that these products are all unique and special, even though they're actually, you know, interchangeable. And you need them to assign value to you know, some item, some product, some whatever, on factors that have nothing to do with its utility. It has to be how it makes them feel about themselves, or what have you. It's not an actually it's not a critical thinking process. So critical thinking would completely destroy the American economy. If the American people were critical thinkers, the economy would collapse. The fundamental mission of advertising and marketing. They want to subvert any degree of critical thinking in a shopper, in a consumer. And the whole economy is based on that. The whole economy requires the population to be disoriented and impulsive and feelings driven, not thinking driven. So I mean, if you're in the West, this is all going to affect you. I mean, in the social order, I've talked about before the fact that America and the West generally, but you know, based on my own experience, especially in the West, in America, it's a society of strangers. You know, economics has to do with that also. Economics has a great role to play in why America is a society of strangers, and the West generally. Again, because with mass production, you know, industrialization and mass production, that was a sort of a form of monopolization, and that created industrial centers. And you know what I'm talking about. Those industrial centers put people out of jobs in other places, in other parts of the country, in the rural areas and so forth, smaller towns and so on. So the jobs and the availability of jobs were all located wherever there were clusters of factories. So then you had urbanization. You started to have these big cities. And then the phenomenon of internal migration within the United States from outlying areas to the urban industrial centers. And that meant that these were people who were uprooted, away from their extended families and so on, strangers living together side by side in tower blocks, and they didn't know each other. That's still the case until now. I mean, you already had in America that America itself is comprised of foreigners. The entire citizenry is comprised of foreigners and immigrants who have nothing in common. They have no shared heritage. They have no shared history, no shared tradition, no traditional structures, and so on. You know, structures that, like back even in Europe, would have been based on some sort of traditional heritage. That's all interrupted when they came to the U.S. So the rules of the society, the rules of those big industrial centers, and then the rules of the country, and the people who make those rules have no grounding, or they didn't arise naturally from a sort of traditional, organic, natural order. But they're sort of elected or appointed or what have you on the basis of some sort of arbitrary popularity, not on experience, not on a track record, not on any connection with the community, with the people, and so on. So none of this actually makes any sense. You know, this isn't historically how societies were supposed to operate or did operate. It makes no sense. It's completely unreasonable and unnatural. It's an unnatural social model. It's a way of trying to manage the society that doesn't make any sense. It's an artificial, manufactured way. But it only makes sense for the people who are in power in that country and in that society, to have the people isolated and atomized and alienated from one another and alone. And they in America, they call this rugged individualism, being independent and all that. But it's all a tactic for making people defenseless, making people helpless, making people lonely and desperate and vulnerable. And this makes them very easy to control. Like in America, you don't run out of things to talk about with regards to why critical thinking isn't in their interests. Like if you just talk about the political realm and the so-called democracy that they have, it's obvious why critical thinking would undermine that system, because they need you to continue believing that you live in a democracy, and that they need you to also believe that democracy is itself the best possible system of government, even though neither of those things is true. Neither of those assertions is actually true. You don't live in a democracy, and democracy is not necessarily the best system possible, not necessarily the best system of government. But, you know, there's so many reasons. The whole society is managed through the infliction, as I've said many, many times, the whole society is managed through the infliction of severe, comprehensive cognitive dissonance, meaning that they need you to believe in a reality that bears no resemblance to the reality that you actually experience and observe in your day-to-day life. Well, obviously, critical thinking would make that a very difficult thing to maintain. That would make it very difficult to maintain the necessary cognitive dissonance that allows the West and American society to perpetuate itself.
We're going to talk about Judaism and Islam.
This man had a crazy theory. Dr. Sheikh Anta Diop believed ancient Egyptians were not the same as modern Egyptians. No, he believed the pharaohs were black. But how to prove it? First, Diop tried pointing to the ancient Egyptians and their legends, the origin stories they recorded in their hieroglyphic texts such as the Edfu texts, and how those legends pointed up the Nile River, further south into Africa. Diop also studied the history of the Egyptians and discovered how their first kings came not from the Levant or the Middle East, but from deeper within Africa, from Upper Egypt and beyond. But he didn't stop there. Diop pointed to ancient Egyptian art, which mostly depicted black Africans dressing, working, dancing, worshipping the way Africans did in the past and still do today. All well and good. But for the experts Diop was trying to convince, even this seemingly strong anthropological evidence was not enough. So Diop went for broke. He demanded that the pharaohs speak for themselves. Diop asked the Egyptian authorities to give him the mummies in their possession so that he could test them for genotype, melanin levels, and carry out osteological bone structure studies. Surely this would end all doubt. Except Diop had a problem. The Egyptian authorities, who regularly loaned, even sold their artifacts to museums in Paris, London, and New York, refused to give this black Senegalese upstart their mummies. For 2 years past, bemoaned Diop at the time, I have been vainly begging the curator of the Cairo Museum for similar samples to analyze. No more than a few square millimeters of skin would be required. A doctor of nuclear physics and of history, had Sheikh Anta Diop reached his limits? Not quite, because Dr. Yves Chamla, head of anthropology at the Muséum del Homme in Paris, came to Diop's aid just at the right time. In 1971, she provided Diop with samples from ancient Egyptian mummies, just the samples he needed. Quickly, a grateful Diop went to work. His results were published and exhibited in 1974 before the UNESCO Symposium in Cairo on the peopling of ancient Egypt. Diop's tests, which he undertook with the help of other interested scientists, quote, undoubtedly classified ancient Egyptians among Africans of black Africa. Game, set, match? No. Offering no scientific retorts to his work, Diop's detractors simply added an editorial to the published findings of the 74 Symposium. It was short, but far from sweet. It read, the arguments put forward have not been accepted by all the experts interested in the problem. Coming, no doubt, from the strong Arab delegation, those words spelled the doom of Diop and others' tireless efforts. In the years to come, Diop's work was airbrushed from history by a conspiracy of omerta, a mafia-like code of silence. Until a decade later, when in 1983 Oxford Doctor of Egyptology and Cambridge Research Fellow Gay Robbins published a groundbreaking work looking into the bone structure of ancient Egyptian pharaohs by studying their mummies. Robbins wanted to know what ethnicity the ancient Egyptians most likely resembled biologically. In order to do this, she would have to measure the body plans and proportions of various mummies, from peasants to pharaohs, against modern populations. Robbins used this, Trotter and Glesser's 1952 estimation of stature from long bones of American whites and Negroes, published in the American Journal of Physical Anthropology. Utilizing this seminal study, Robbins came to one of the most disastrous results for the Egyptology cartel. It's better to show you exactly what she found than tell you or paraphrase. In the Journal of Human Evolution, under the title The Physical Proportions and Stature of New Kingdom Pharaohs, Robbins wrote this, quote, it can be seen that all the pharaonic values, including those of Shmakhareh, lie much closer to the Negro curve than to the white curve. Robbins' 1983 study went on to coin a never-before-heard term for the body proportions of the Egyptian pharaohs she was studying, super Negroid. that bears repeating. Super Negroid. She said the pharaohs had super Negroid body features. But the shocks don't stop there. Robbins concluded, quote, estimates of living stature based on X-ray measurements applied to the Trotter and Glesser 1958 Negro equations for the femur, tibia and humerus have been made for ancient Egyptian kings belonging to the 18th and 19th dynasties. It is shown that the limbs of the pharaohs, like those of other ancient Egyptians, had Negroid characteristics, in that the distal segments were relatively long in comparison with the proximal segments. End quote. But the shocks kept coming. Almost as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing, Robbins conducted another similar study in 1986. In her work, Pre-Dynastic Egyptian Stature and Physical Proportions, Robbins concluded the following, quote, more consistent results are obtained from ancient Egyptian male skeletons if Trotter and Glesser formula for Negroes are used, rather than those for whites, which have always been applied in the past. Their physical proportions were more like modern Negroes than those of modern whites. If ancient Egyptian males had what may be termed Negroid proportions, it seems reasonable that females did likewise. This conclusion is all the more amazing when you consider that the Trotter and Glesser yardstick Robbins used as a gauge was based on a population of African Americans, meaning it would appear after all, they was kings. But here's the thing, if you read the introduction to the Robbins study, you can tell she didn't want to accept the implications of her findings. Inexplicably, without any explanation, she casually opens her report with the following statement. See if you can spot the cognitive dissonance yourself. Quote, it has been recognized by Warren and others that the physical proportions of ancient Egyptians had Negroid affinities. Nevertheless, since they were certainly not Negroes, the use of Negro equations to estimate their stature has generally been avoided. Wait, what? Since they were certainly not Negroes? Robbins offers no evidence for this assertion. She just makes it, proving the endemic, well-embedded prejudice in Egyptology that this man was up against all along. 10 years on from 86, Sonia Zarklevsky's findings in a 1996 paper went on to agree with Robbins, stating that, quote, Egyptians had the super Negroid body plan as described by Robbins. Now ask yourself, why haven't you heard of these studies? The answer is short and still not sweet. Pride and prejudice. Egyptology is stuck in a culture of saving face at all costs, having been founded on historical racist assumptions and notions about black Africa. It's the same reason you hear of thoroughly debunked genetic studies every few years claiming to prove that the Egyptians had Near Eastern and European affinities before you'll ever hear of Diop's, Robbins and Zarklevsky's studies. What these half-baked genetic studies don't make readily clear to their dupes is that the sample size of mummies used are regularly selected from across a very narrow band of time and space. Imagine trying to ascertain the predominant race of the founders of modern America and pulling your sample size from an Irish immigrant graveyard in Boston during the late 1800s, and then concluding based on that all Americans throughout time were of Irish stock. Or imagine using studies based on haplotype DNA analysis and concluding based on these studies that the ancient Egyptians were identical to most Europeans and Near Eastern people, without mentioning the fact that the same haplotypes can also be found in Central Africa. Besides this, better, more accurate genetic studies based on genotyping are available, the kind that would tell you specifically the genetic makeup and the likely ethnicity of the predominant population in ancient Egypt. And yet, as others have pointed out, these studies are never carried out. Why? Simply put, because the answers they would throw up are too problematic for the cartel that runs Egyptology. But happily, not all scientists and Egyptologists are part of this cartel. Thanks to the work of many like Sally Ann Ashton, Rebecca Futo Kennedy, Stuart Tyson Smith, David Wengrow, Soy Keita, and Christopher Ehret, the truth, like a great river, you might say like the Nile, is bursting the dam of lies. In 2023, the latter of the names just cited, Dr. Christopher Eric, said this about the Nakada civilization, that is, the civilization which birthed ancient Egypt. Major burial sites of those founding locales of ancient Egypt in the 4th millennium BCE, notably El Badari as well as Nakada, show no demographic indebtedness to the Levant. They reveal instead a population with cranial and dental features with closest parallels to those of other long-time populations of the surrounding areas of northeastern Africa, such as Nubia and the northern horn of Africa. So it would seem that Dr. Diop was right all along. First they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win. Right now we are at the fighting stage, with Hollywood pulling stunts like a Cleopatra docudrama nobody asked for. Stunts that suit the detractors just perfectly, as they can conveniently jump on a bandwagon that decries the straw men proponents of a black Cleopatra as ignorant rubes. But they are fighting a losing battle, because like this researcher painfully found out, until modern Egyptology comes clean and abandons its denial, the experts will continue to be stunned by what they find the deeper they dig into the sands. Join us, like, subscribe, and rep the culture with us at Trill Black, where we don't run from the truth.
Hey, call me Louis. This is my spot. Louis spot.
I have been talking about racism, white supremacy for the last, I hate to say it, 37 years. And it has been interesting to me because many people, many of my colleagues in psychiatry have said racism was a part of the past. And black people do not have to talk about racism anymore. And why is that? Dr. Francis Welsing continuing to beat on the drum about racism, white supremacy. Because it wasn't long ago, although it's been decades ago, that I debated another Nobel Prize laureate, Dr. William Shockley, the person who won the Nobel Prize for inventing the transistor. And he was going around in the 1970s talking about black people were genetically inferior compared to white people. But I had written a paper that I presented in 1970 at the National Medical Association, because then some of my colleagues were talking about racism. And I had written a paper talking about why do people who classify themselves as white have to demean and degrade black people's genetics. And that paper was entitled The Crest Theory of Color Confrontation and Racism, White Supremacy. And in that paper, I talked about the fact that when people who classify themselves as white keep saying something is wrong with black people's genetics, see, 3 of their fingers are pointing back at themselves. And I didn't invent any genetics. I just simply thought about the things that I had been taught in their institutions and in medical school. That the inability to produce skin pigmentation is defined not by Francis Welsing, but by their own scientists as a genetic recessive trait and a genetic deficiency. A genetic deficiency, and it is albinism. A-L-B-I-N-I-S-M, albinism, meaning the cells in everybody's skin that are called melanocytes that are charged with the production of melanin pigment, the black pigment. If you have a lot of melanin, you're crystal black, a little bit less you look brown, a little bit less you look red, a little bit less you look yellow, and white is almost none at all. Now they had defined albinism as a genetic deficiency state when they were talking about mice and rats and other forms of life. They never thought that some black person would come along and say, if the majority of the people on the planet have pigmented skins, then as far as human beings are concerned, white skin is albinism. Do you follow what I'm saying? See, in other words, they were busy saying something is wrong with you, when in reality there was something wrong with them. And I explained that this is the reason that they suntan. You see, trying to create color. And I'm updating it and saying now that this is the reason that so many of them are trying to cover their bodies with tattoos. See, now we need to think about that, because sometimes monkey see, monkey do. And we don't understand why. See, it's like they do something, we think we have to do something. And some black people who think that they have to get in the sun and tan too. See, but we have been blessed by the Creator with color. And indeed and in fact, the Creator made us the chosen people, in that we are the mothers and fathers of everybody on this planet. You see, and as the original people, we were crystal black people. The color that we have been taught to hate under racism, white supremacy. You see, but this not only explained the sun tanning and maybe now the tattooing, but I said this is the core of racism. And this is why racism contains within it dynamic the need to destroy black people in general, but black men in particular. You see, and we are seeing that with the high level of incarceration of black men, with the dropping out of school, and the high levels of unemployment. And that goes back to the fact that black men are perceived as the persons who can cause white genetic annihilation. Now, as a female, women, we have ovaries, and in our ovaries we have the genetic material. But women cannot impose and force sexual intercourse. Shall I say that again? See, females, we can try to entice and influence. But if a female, if I reached in my purse and pulled out an Uzi, and I started to threaten a man and say, I don't care if your wife is here, you are going to have sexual intercourse, and I frightened him, he wouldn't be able to. See, because the erection disappears in the presence of fear. So women cannot impose sexual intercourse. And so the white collective, from the time that Christopher Columbus came out of Spain in his little boats and started the white people circumnavigating the globe, they began to realize, wait a minute, All these other people on the planet are people of color. And the men, just like the founding fathers. Did you hear the term? See, black people, we don't need to say founding fathers. We need to talk about the founding fathers, the Thomas Jeffersons, the George Washingtons, and all of those slaveholders who were raping and taking sexual advantage of black women. They found out that by sexually relating, their white color would disappear. And they began to understand, wait a minute, when they realized that they were just a tiny, tiny minority population on the planet. And see, we're still busy calling ourselves minorities. But guess what, ladies and gentlemen? They are the minority on the planet, but they know the value of saying repeatedly to other people that they are the minorities because it makes them feel weak and it makes them feel vulnerable. So we really need to start talking about the global white minority. The global white minority. The global white minority. See, and the global white minority realize that for them to genetically survive on planet Earth, they have to have control over all of the non-white people. And because black people have the greatest genetic potential to cause white genetic annihilation, the heaviest pressure has to be on us as a people, as a total people, and as black men in particular. And so therefore, we learned, many of us learned before we learned how to read or write. If you are black, get back. If you are brown, stick around. If you are yellow, you're mellow, and if you're white, you're all right. They were just color coding what they needed to do for white genetic survival. And that is continuing on the planet today. So I maintain that we need to update our understanding and understand the noose, like they're trying to tell us, is just a joke, and that it doesn't mean anything. I would suggest that for every person who hasn't already read the book, Without Sanctuary, it's a pictorial essay of all the lynchings and castrations of black men and burning of black men as white people stood around and cheered, and in some cases taking home body parts. We need to look at that and study that, and I say don't waste any energy hating white people. That's not taking us anywhere. It's like if we sat down at a chessboard to play chess at a tournament. You don't beat your opponent by hating your opponent. You have to take all of your energy and understand exactly the moves that the opponent is going to make and make certain that you know how to counter those moves. Now, this is not a mystery to black people. Black people are expert playing basketball, playing football, playing baseball. All of these are psyching your opponent. What moves is the opponent going to make? And you make counter moves that can checkmate the opponent and move on to victory. So we need to understand and master, instead of trying to ignore racism and pretend that it doesn't exist or that it went away some time ago. No, racism is alive and well. Racism is a total global system that, as Neely Fuller outlined in his textbook for victims of racism, textbook for victims of white supremacy, racism operates in economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. Now, I'm adding to that health, because people are busy right now talking about healthcare disparities. But there are disparities in all of those areas of activity. There are disparities in economics and disparities in education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war, and health. And I say disparities in entertainment. Why? When only certain kinds of images can be shown of black people, where negative and demeaning and degrading and buffoon-like images are portrayed of black people, that is helping to maintain the system of racism, white supremacy. Or in entertainment, when the system of racism says, I know people like Public Enemy, they started out with giving a political message. But when they put that political message on a beat, the system of racism said they can revolutionize the thinking of their people. So no, we have to pay them large sums of money and make some of them millionaires. But the price they will have to pay is calling themselves dogs, and calling themselves gangsters and thugs, and calling women bitches and hoes and bow wows, because they understand if you can get a people to demean and to degrade themselves, then you have beaten them. You have beaten them and you have defeated them.
Now, that sums it up for...
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we come to the close of this evening. And I hope y'all got something out of this right here. I would recommend that you listen to this over and over in its entirety, so that will let you know what you have to do. Okay? You all have a good evening. I've been your host, Tarhaka Monterey Bay. See you next time. Goodbye.
This iHeart radio station is brought to you by Vitamin Water.
Fire, flood, tornado, hurricane. The damage they can cause to your home is devastating. But there's another disaster that strikes when you least expect it. I'm talking about your own insurance company when they deny your claim. If you believe your homeowner's insurance isn't paying what they should, let the lawyers at Farah & Farah review your policy word for word for free. Farah & Farah, here for you, here for good. Jacksonville.